Chapter 445. Of course, let's sign the contract first, and then I'll send you 100 million renminbi. You can send it to me as soon as possible. Zhang Hai looked at Wang Yang in front of him and said very seriously, 375 million renminbi? This much RMB is equivalent to about 57.9 million US dollars. Zhang Hai has this much cash now, not to mention, this is to help him level up faster. Not to mention spending 300 million renminbi. Even if it costs 3 billion renminbi, he will spend it. After all, this is the foundation of his life in this world. About a month. I can send it to you in about a month. Wang Yang was about to go crazy when he heard Zhang Hai's words. Just now, he just invited Zhang Hai to come over out of courtesy. But he didn't expect to make a business worth hundreds of millions just like that. Although Fatty Wang's business was not small, his annual turnover as a second-hand dealer was less than 10 million. The shop could earn a few million, but these few million would have to be given away at the end of the year. Although Zhang Hai's business will cost him a lot of money, he will at least earn more than 100 million renminbi. This is equivalent to what he earns in 10 years. The most important thing is that after he gets this money, he can do other things. He is really rich, very rich. Okay, 1 month it is. Send these things to the address I've given you. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai immediately said with a smile, and immediately asked Penelope to go to the shop next door to print the contract. Wang Yang immediately went to look for his lawyer. Initially, his lawyer was quite arrogant when he came. After confirming that there are no problems with the contract, Zhang Hai and Wang Yang also signed it. Then Zhang Hai first transferred 100 million renminbi to Wang Yang's account. Of course, Wang Yang can also run away with this money. But in this case, the goods, houses, shops etc. in China will all belong to Zhang Hai. These things are worth almost 100 million renminbi. After everything is done, Wang Yang said that he would treat Zhang Hai to a meal, but Zhang Hai has something to do today, so he can only make an appointment tomorrow. After everything is confirmed, Zhang Hai and others left Wang Yang's shop. Of course, before leaving, Wang Yang gave each of them a small thing. The so-called small things were all worth tens of thousands of yuan. Chili got a pair of diamond earrings, Penelope got a ruby necklace, Delina and Marian got a Hatian jade talisman. Azalina got a jade bracelet. Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi originally wanted to choose a ring, but Wang Yang didn't want to waste any more time. Instead, he gave Wang Yang a pair of diamond earrings. Penelope got a ruby necklace, Delina and Marian got a jade talisman. Azalina got a jade bracelet, and Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi originally wanted to choose a ring. But after all, this was a gift from someone else, not bought by Zhang Hai. They can't wear a ring given by another man. So in the end, they each asked for a bracelet, and Zhang Hai casually took a jade token. As for Minister Qin, he is a construction worker. He won't take these things, and he doesn't care about these things. But all in all, everyone is still very happy. Wang Yang sent Zhang Hai and others for a long time before he rushed back to the shop, ready to start working. He will definitely not let go of this business. And who knows if Zhang Hai, this rich man, will still want these things in the future. What if he went crazy one day and decided to turn his own villa into Hetian Yu's? Wouldn't he be in trouble then? After coming out of Wang Yang's shop, Zhang Hai and others are obviously in a good mood. At first, the only one who is a little unhappy is Chili, because Zhang Hai spent hundreds of millions to buy a bunch of useless things. But seeing that Zhang Hai is happy, she didn't say anything. As the saying goes, money can't buy Zhang Hai's happiness. Then, they walked around Panjiayuan and went to look at the street stalls there. Although they didn't get anything useful, Zhang Hai and others unknowingly spent more than 2,000 yuan to buy a bunch of small things. Since they are happy, they don't need to think too much. Seeing that Zhang Hai and others are happy, Minister Qin started to plan in his heart. Just as Zhang Hai thought, this guy indeed has something to do with Zhang Hai. Otherwise, as a dignified deputy minister, he would be crazy to accompany Zhang Hai to have fun. If he wants to show that he cares, he can just send a section chief or a director over. After all, Zhang Hai doesn't have any political status. But now, it seems that he might have to change his purpose. After walking around Panjiayuan, it was already noon. After everyone got back in the car, Minister Qin ordered everyone to go to the Daidu restaurant. This is because they said that they want to eat Tan family's dishes today. And Tan family's dishes are only available in the Daidu restaurant. Tan family's dishes are one of the famous official dishes in Huaxia. It was founded by the family of Tan Zongjuan, a bureaucrat at the end of the Qing dynasty. In 1874, Tan Zongjuan once took the imperial examination and entered the Hanlin Academy as an official. So this dish is also called the imperial examination. There is no branch in the country. Only the Daidu restaurant has such a restaurant. Just like Li family's dishes, it is not something you can eat whenever you want to. Normally, if Zhang Hai and others want to eat, it is impossible to eat without making a reservation in advance. But Minister Qin is not an ordinary person. He was also ordered to come here by the higher-ups, so it is naturally impossible to make a reservation. When Zhang Hai and others arrived, they were already able to eat directly. However, when he opened the menu, Zhang Hai found that he was a little confused. Because the dishes here are indeed a little. A little. Winner's Braised Wing 1688, Throne Seeker 1688, Oolong Stepping in Green 1688, Royal Red Crown Swallow 1688, Garlic Skirt 1688, Three Stewed Blood Swallow 1688, Dragon Armor Removal, Sea Cucumber, 1688, Premium Dry Leaning Shrimp 1688, First Grade Steamed Tofu 1688, Yam Vegetable Pancake 1688. Looking at this list of dishes, Zhang Hai felt that he was really too naive. These ingredients are not very bad, but they are not particularly good either. There is no top-notch Asiatic wing or top-notch two-headed abalone, but they are sold for 1688. It is up to you to eat it or not. This is no longer a problem of cheating foreigners. This is a problem of cheating foreigners to death. Zhang Hai did some calculations in his heart. 4 people like them, if they ate until they were full, it would be difficult for them to leave this restaurant without 30,000 or 50,000 yuan. Fortunately, Minister Qin was paying the bill today, so Zhang Hai wouldn't be polite. Minister Qin was also very calm. Although the imperial court did not allow public funds to be used to eat and drink, this was still money that needed to be spent. After all, Zhang Hai had helped the imperial court solve a big problem. Minister Qin was also very calm. After all, Zhang Hai helped the imperial court solve a big problem. Therefore, he does not need to spend this money. Soon, the dishes that Zhang Hai ordered were all served. In fact, it is not only Zhang Hai's first time here, but also Qili and others' first time here. After all, very few people would treat people here. If you go to an ordinary seafood restaurant, what can you eat for tens of thousands of yuan? The lobsters are as big as you want, the abalones are as many as you want, and the sea cucumbers are as long as you want. It is not like here, where the stingy dishes are so expensive. Therefore, after seeing the price of these dishes, they are secretly speechless. Even if the price is changed to dollars, these things are too expensive. How can a dish cost nearly $300? This is like eating gold bars. However, when the dishes were served, Zhang Hai was quite satisfied. At least it didn't look bad, and it smelled very good. Out of curiosity, he also took a bite with his chopsticks, but this bite made Zhang Hai immediately narrow his eyes. Delicious. There was really nothing much to say. It was indeed delicious, truly delicious. Every dish had its own unique taste, which was very much in line with Zhang Hai's taste buds. Not only could the original taste of the ingredients be magnified infinitely in his mouth, but the juice that was concocted was also indescribably fresh. This might be the secret of the school's dishes that were not passed on. That is why it is so valuable. This kind of taste was purely due to the chef's craftsmanship. It couldn't be stimulated by the original taste of the ingredients. Even if the ingredients had brought out 120% of the taste, it still wouldn't work. This dish was purely made with the chef's craftsmanship. If the raw materials of these dishes are not even a fraction of 688 yuan, then the chef's craftsmanship is worth 1,000 yuan. Of course, with Zhang Hai's personality, although he likes to eat this kind of food, it is destined that he will never come here without an invitation in the future. The meal is quite enjoyable. Anyway, Minister Qin does not need to spend money, so he is very happy to eat. After lunch, they stepped into the car again, but this time, they are going to the suburbs. Where are we going? The Great Wall? We have already been there. Looking at the road ahead, Zhang Hai hesitated for a moment and said to Minister Qin. To be honest, he already feels very good today. Not only did he buy Hetian Jade, but he also had such a meal at noon. The taste of the school's cooking is very good, So he is looking forward to the taste of the Li family's cooking in the evening. Now, seeing the car driving further and further away, although he is not afraid, he is still thinking about the Li family's cooking. He does not want to be unable to eat it when the time comes. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Minister Qin also said with a smile, "Don't worry, you will definitely like it there. Didn't you say that you want to bring some excellent ingredients from our country to the United States? This time, you can choose whatever you want." Hearing that, Zhang Hai's eyes suddenly lit up. He is indeed very interested in these things. What is the most troublesome thing in the United States? That is, he can't eat the taste of his hometown, although this time, Xueqi came to his hometown. However, even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice. Some things can't be made just because you know how to cook. Some ingredients can be replaced, but some can't. This is a very simple problem. So Zhang Hai is going back this time. Since it is convenient, he is going to bring more things back. In addition to the 3 kinds of fish, other things are indispensable. Chapter 446. The car quickly drove out of the capital. Of course, the capital's urban area was very large, unlike Ice City. Although it was the largest city in the inland, only smaller than Fog City, but Fog City was next to the Yangtze River. The urban area was particularly small. Out of the city center, it was basically the urban-rural fringe. Further north, even some villages could be considered as part of Ice City. Although the capital's area was not as large as Ice City, the urban area was much larger. After all, Ice City had not even filled up the area between the 2nd and 3rd Ring Road, but the capital had already filled up the 5th Ring Road. However, this time, Zhang Hai and the others did not go to the 5th Ring Road, but out of the 5th Ring Road. According to Zhang Hai's estimation, it was better to say that this was Ji province than the capital. However, the people here were still using the capital's ID cards. Fortunately, they did not drive to Ji province. In front of Zhang Hai and the others, a huge building complex appeared. As the car drove over, Zhang Hai saw a banner hanging at the main entrance. It was a warm celebration of the victory of the 17th National Agricultural Products Sales Conference. Seeing this, Zhang Hai's eyes could not help but light up. Agricultural Products Sales Conference. What Zhang Hai wanted to buy, in addition to those expensive things, were the local specialties of Hedi. Originally, he thought that he would have to go to these places one by one, but he did not expect that he would be able to do this in the capital. "I don't know much about the things inside. I've already arranged for someone to accompany you. When you see anything you like, just tell me. How much do you want? I'll give you the price according to the purchase price." Seeing that Zhang Hai was really interested, Minister Qin also said this with a smile. It seemed that he was not going to accompany Zhang Hai in. "Then I'll have to trouble you, Minister Qin." Hearing his words, Zhang Hai did not insist on his company. He smiled and led everyone out of the car. Sure enough, as soon as they got out of the car, there was already a middle-aged man waiting for Zhang Hai. Hello. Are you Mr. Zhang? My name is Sun Yuan. You can call me Old Sunday. Let me introduce you to the things inside." As soon as he saw Zhang Hai get out of the car, the middle-aged man walked over enthusiastically and said with a friendly face, "Then Old Sun, let's go in." Zhang Hai glanced at the car behind him and said with a smile. He then followed Sun Yuan into the hall in front of him. Minister Qin, who was in the car, took out his phone and made a call. Yes, just as Zhang Hai thought, Minister Qin was indeed looking for Zhang Hai because he had something to discuss with Zhang Hai. Although Hua Xia and the United States were not complete enemies, they still saw each other as their biggest threat. Now that Zhang Hai helped the imperial court solve the oil problem, the imperial court was thinking that it seemed that Zhang Hai's influence in the United States was not small. He even knew Du Feimin. Could they develop Zhang Hai and make him a spy for the imperial court? At the very least, his manor could become a hiding place for their other spies and agents. Of course, the imperial court also knew that if you talked to Zhang Hai about patriotism, politics, and self-sacrifice, Zhang Hai would not even listen. Why would he risk his family's destruction to help the imperial court offend the American government in the United States? If this was discovered, his manor would be destroyed in an instant. Therefore, it was precisely because of this that Minister Qin came to accompany Zhang Hai. In fact, he was also testing Zhang Hai. In this world, the imperial court believed that no one was airtight. Zhang Hai must have a weakness, and the first thing that came to their mind was money. They had also done a simple investigation on Zhang Hai. They thought that Zhang Hai could not make much money. After all, Zhang Hai raised cows. If it were not for the fact that the cows he raised were too good, the price would not have been very high. They really couldn't be sold at a high price. An adult cow in the United States was only around $10,000 on average. 20,000 cows were indeed worth $200 million, but there were taxes, labor, drinks, and so on. One cow was only around $6,000 on average. After deducting the $5,000 needed to buy the cow, one could only make around $1,000 per cow. 20,000 cows were worth $20 million. Converted into RMB, it was more than $120 million. The imperial court thought that if they directly gave Zhang Hai $1 billion or $800 million, would Zhang Hai agree? Of course, the imperial court would not spend more than that. After all, it was just a location. There was no need to spend more than $10 billion. However, after seeing Zhang Hai by the Hatian Jade today, Minister Qin knew that this idea might not work. Zhang Hai spent $400 million just to renovate his own room. That meant that Zhang Hai's net worth was at least $400 million. $1 billion or $800 million would not be enough to satisfy Zhang Hai. Money was not enough, and Zhang Hai did not need the privileges in the country. He was not interested in entering the bureaucracy. He had many beautiful women around him. He did not lack women. Money, power, and women. Zhang Hai did not lack these three things. In that case, the imperial court really did not have anything to offer. As he thought of this, Minister Qin's attitude gradually changed. Otherwise, he would have followed them in. But now, Zhang Hai did not care. If he did not say anything, Zhang Hai did not need to refuse. It was simple. Regardless of what Minister Qin and the higher-ups said, Zhang Hai had already walked into the hall. However, as soon as he walked in, he could not help but exclaim. This hall was really big. It was about 20,000 square meters. It could be even bigger. Huaxia had a total of 34 provincial administrative regions. This place was also divided into 34 parts. At this time, many businessmen were wandering around the major regions, looking for opportunities to cooperate. This place was not open to the public. In other words, ordinary tourists could not enter. This place was specially prepared for the businessmen in the land. Of course, there were not only plant specialties, but also animal specialties. Sun Yuan came in with Zhang Hai. As soon as he walked in, many people took the initiative to greet him. It seemed that Sun Yuan's status here was not low. It was understandable. Although Minister Qin did not accompany Zhang Hai still enjoyed Sun Yuan's status. Our agricultural products fair was specially approved by the higher-ups in 1997. It was suspended in 2008 for the purpose of sharing local specialties and resources. Therefore, you can find almost all the products in the country here. Everything that can be found in the local market can be found here. Let's look around as we walk. Looking at Zhang Hai, Sun Yuan greeted the others and smiled. While leading Zhang Hai and the others inside, he introduced them. The first thing that entered Zhang Hai's eyes were the specialties of several major municipalities. Although municipalities were provincial in name, to be honest, after all, no matter how big a city was, it was just a city. It could not be compared with a province, even if it had an advantage in administrative level. The first thing that Zhang Hai saw were the several booths in the capital. The booths in the capital did not have many things. Roast duck, various pastries, pickles from liubiju, bamboo shoots, dates, and so on. But to be honest, there was nothing that attracted Zhang Hai. The only thing that attracted Zhang Hai was the instant boiled mutton, but unfortunately, this mutton was not a specialty of the capital. It was from Mongolia. The booths in Shanghai did not have much. Most of them were pastries, but there were two things that interested Zhang Hai. Saffron and 9 caddies of yellow. Yes, saffron was not a specialty of Tibet. It was from Shanghai. It was just that this thing was called saffron. More than 90% of the saffron in the country was produced in Shanghai. Therefore, this was the main production area. 9 caddies of yellow was also called pudong chicken. Because an adult rooster could grow more than 9 hands, it was also called 9 caddies of yellow. As one of the 3 largest chickens in the country, only the Langshan chicken could be compared with it. Zhang Hai was very interested in these two things. After remembering it in his heart, Zhang Hai continued to walk inside. The exhibition hall behind Shanghai was in Tianjin City. Tianjin City was also one of the municipalities. There were a lot of specialties. The most famous steamed buns, pear, fried dough twists, and radishes, also known as sandnest radishes, are known throughout the country for their crispness and sweetness. This time, Zhang Hai wanted to get some of these things back to grow. After all, there were too few vegetables in the United States. Next was Fog City. But to be honest, the things in Fog City overlapped with those in Sichuan. For example, some tea, hot pot, etc. They were basically the same, so Zhang Hai did not look at them carefully. After the 4 municipalities, it was time for the other provinces. Yes, Huaxia had a total of 4 municipalities. The famous Shenzhen city was a special economic zone, but it was not a municipality. If Zhang Hai did not come here, he would not understand. After the 4 municipalities, it was time for the 3 eastern provinces. The specialties of the 3 eastern provinces were also quite overlapping. Zhang Hai was from Bing City, so he naturally knew that the specialties of Liao province were also found in Ji province and Heilong province. The only thing that they did not have was seafood. However, Zhang Hai did not lack seafood. What Ji province had, Heilong province and Liao province also had. What Heilong province had, the other 2 provinces also had. The only special thing was the specialties of Xing and territory. For example, the locust fish and flying dragon mentioned before. But Zhang Hai did not lack these things. He walked around the exhibition hall and was interested in a lot of things. But he could not raise most of them. The fungus in the northeast was the best in the world. But the problem was that he did not know how to raise them. The mushrooms here were also the best in the world. But it was still the same problem. He did not know how to raise them. Ginseng was also the best in the world. How can Chongbai ginseng and other ginseng be compared? But it was still the same problem. He did not know how to raise them. So, after looking around, he wanted a lot of things, but there were not many things that he could buy. But when he was about to walk through the exhibition hall of the 3 provinces, he suddenly saw something. Rice. Seeing the rice, Zhang Hai did not know why, but he swallowed his saliva subconsciously. Then, his eyes suddenly lit up. Yes, rice. He said that after going to the US, something was missing. Growing rice seemed to be a good idea. Chapter 447. Those who had lived overseas would know that rice can be found in supermarkets in Europe and the US. But Europeans and Americans do not buy much rice. They were more used to eating pasta, which was bread and the like, but Asians preferred to eat rice. When it comes to rice, there are 3 major rice-producing areas in the world. The rice produced in these 3 areas is the best. Of course, rice is also divided into different grades and types. Ordinary hybrid rice can only fill one's stomach. The worst rice produced in these 3 areas is Korean rice. Huaxia's rice is in the middle and Japan's rice is the best. But Japan is only a small place. That's why the amount of rice produced there is limited, and it is very expensive. It's hard to imagine that a bowl of rice with a Japanese electric cooker can be sold for dozens of RMB. It's hard to understand. As for the rice in China, there were 2 places that were recommended. One was Hailong Changwu City, and the other was Liao Province's Jinpan. In the beginning, the rice in Jinpan was specially provided. But later, because Liao Province was an industrial province, the land was heavily polluted. As a result, Liao Province's rice gradually lost its original glory, while Heilong Province, which had always been China's granary, suddenly emerged as a new force to be reckoned with. For many years, it had been the country's #1 grain producer. Just the grain produced in one season was enough to feed the entire country for 3 months. The quality of the rice produced is also second to none. Of course, this also depends on the original rice. Pearl rice is sold in supermarkets all over the country. This type of rice is also the most produced in the Northeast. But to be honest, this type of rice is sold in the villages. If it is not sold, it will be used to feed the chickens. People rarely eat this type of rice. Of course, when the new rice is harvested, they will eat some of it. But it is not the main food. People like Zhang Hai and the rest of the people in Bing City eat Daohuaxiang rice. This type of rice is very expensive in the south. Kofgo's Daohuaxiang rice is sold for more than 80 renminbi per 10 kilograms bag. This is only the worst variety of Dao Huaxiang rice. If it is a good variety, it will be sold for more than 10 renminbi per 500 kilograms. In the local area, this rice was only sold for about 3 to 4 renminbi. The better ones were sold for about 6 renminbi. In the south, the price would be doubled. But after going abroad, the price was not only doubled, it was 6 times. Zhang Hai bought rice in Winthrop. Korean rice cost $21 per kilogram. Northeastern rice cost $18 per kilogram. And Japanese rice cost $32 per kilogram. Although the taste of Korean rice was not as good as Northeast rice, it was more expensive than Northeast rice. However, looking at the price, it was really a little painful. It was $18 a kilogram, which was $9 a caddy. It was more than $50 a caddy. Fortunately, Zhang Hai didn't lack money. But before he saw it, he didn't care. Now that he suddenly saw this type of rice, Zhang Hai's brain became active. He specially called Robbins to ask if anyone in his family knows how to grow rice. The result was that no one knows how to grow rice. But it wasn't difficult to grow. After all, America was all about machines, so it wasn't difficult to grow them. Moreover, Winthrop had abundant water resources, so it wasn't difficult to grow rice and other things. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also made a purchase list of rice in his heart. But it is destined not to be planted this year. It is already June. He missed the planting time. Winthrop and Huaxia's northeast temperature are about the same. So he has to wait until next year to plant. But this year, Zhang Hai can buy a batch to eat. This is the most important thing. In Mongolia there are a lot of things. Zhang Hai has been coveting Ujimkin sheep for a long time. This kind of sheep is best for mutton soup. It is much better than boar goat. Zhang Hai naturally wants to buy this. There was also the German donkey from Lu province. Dragon meat in the sky. Donkey meat on the ground. Zhang Hai also wanted to see if the donkey he raised was as delicious as the flying dragon. In addition to donkey meat, there is also pork. There is also pork in the United States, but it is too little, and the taste is also ordinary. After all, pork is not an indispensable dish on the American table, so there are not many people who buy it. Naturally, there are not many people who raise it. Since Zhang Hai wants to buy this time, he also wants to bring some pigs back. The pig he chose is the Jiangxiang pig. This is a national second-class protected breed. It is the best pig in the country. It is only produced in the Jiangxiang Yuelyang district of your province. This kind of pig is a kind of miniature pig. Its weight rarely exceeds 30 kilograms. It can be raised as a pet pig. Of course, the best way is to eat meat, especially roasted meat. The taste is really good. Other than these food, Zhang Hai also wants to buy a lot of tea trees. These tea trees are good for his absorption of spiritual qi. It is not like the time when he asked Elder Zhang for tea trees. Now, Zhang Hai can get as many tea trees as he wants. There are only a few tea trees in his house. Although they are all alive and growing well, it is not easy to get them. But to be honest, it is not easy to get tea leaves. The amount of tea leaves that can be picked from each tea tree is very small. When the tea trees are gathered together, Fengyu has to drink them carefully. He does not dare to brew too much tea. But it does not matter now. He can bring back 100 to 80 tea trees. If he wants to drink Longjing tea, he can drink Xueqi tea. If he wants to drink Taiping tea, he can drink Taiping tea. After walking around here for more than 3 hours, Zhang Hai also listed the things he wants to buy. Of course, this is only what he wants to buy now. If he thinks of something in the future, he will buy again. Anyway, the imperial court allowed him to take these things away. In addition to the 3 kinds of fish he wants at the beginning, he wants 209 kilogram yellow chickens, 200 wolf mountain chickens, and 100 kilograms of saffron bulbs, which is the plant of this thing, which is 50 kilograms. He is going to plant these flower stalks behind his villa. Of course, this thing is very popular recently. It is said that animals are not allowed to eat it. But in fact, it is all nonsense. Nothing will happen to animals if they eat it. In addition to the flower stalks, there are also the seeds of sand nest radish. This kind of thing is originally a protected species, but Sun Yuan agreed with Zhang Hai with a smile. There are 1,000 Ujimkin sheep. Zhang Hai has eaten this kind of sheep before. It is really delicious. So now he can't wait to see what these sheep will become in his pasture. There are 20 German donkeys. This kind of meat donkey has no market in the United States, unlike the Ujimkin sheep. Even if he does not eat it, Robbins and the others will still eat it. But donkeys and horses are not eaten in the United States. So, he basically raises them for his family to eat, so he does not need too many. There are 100 Zhangxiang pigs. Zhang Hai is still very interested in this kind of small pig. Most importantly, Americans also eat pork. The most important thing is the rice with the fragrance of the rice flour. However, the current rice can only be planted for one season. Zhang Hai is not too concerned about this. He will come back to buy next year. The Americans are still quite open. After roughly ordering these things here, Zhang Hai also paid the deposit. Although Zhang Hai bought a lot of things, in fact, the things themselves are not worth much. The most valuable thing is actually the transportation. If he wants to transport these live animals to the United States, it is definitely impossible to take a plane. By the time he takes a plane, more than half of these animals will die first. Then, he can only take a boat. It is close to a month, plus the transportation of the boat and the consumption of their feed. These are all money. However, Zhang Hai is not too concerned about this. It is not like he has no money. So, Zhang Hai first transferred 1 million yuan to this person called Sun Yuan. Everything will be left to him. If there is more money, it will all be his. If there is not enough money, Zhang Hai will compensate him. It is that simple. As for the 3 types of fish that Zhang Hai wanted at the beginning, Sun Yuan also told him about it. The current situation is not too ideal. Looking at Zhang Hai, Sun Yuan said to Zhang Hai, "Mr. Zhang, the 3 types of fish you want, Minister Qin has already instructed. I have also coordinated. The large yellow croakers are not difficult to get. We can send them to you directly. Together with these animals, we will charge you $8 for each fry. This is also the intention of the higher-ups." $8? Then let's start with 3 million. Listening to this price, it is really cheap. In fact, what Zhang Hai does not know is that the reason why the large yellow croakers he ate that day are so expensive is that they are wild. The yellow croakers raised by this family are only about $40 or $50. There is a huge difference in price. However, Zhang Hai does not care, because the fish he raises are wild, even wilder than the wild ones. This is also his secret. Upon hearing Zhang Hai's words, Sun Yuan's heart skipped a beat. Originally, he thought that this time's business was just a small one, $1 million or so deal. He didn't think that Zhang Hai would directly ask for 3 million fish. Sun Yuan's heart skipped a beat. $8 for one tail, 3 million for one tail, that is 24 million yuan. He can also make a lot of money from this. This is not a problem. After all, Minister Qin has spoken, so we can give you some. At most, we can get you 100,000 fish. The price of each fish is $70. Looking at Zhang Hai, Sun Yuan carefully said. When Zhang Hai opened his mouth and said 3 million taels, Sun Yuan was scared silly. This time he didn't even say you, but you. 70? I will pay 80 for one tail. Let's see if we can get more. Zhang Hai calculated in his heart. In fact, Zhang Hai's main goal is the Yangtze River swordfish. 100,000 fish is really not enough. Moreover, he is confident that he can make these fish grow fast and wild, and adapt to his manner. This is where his confidence lies. This I have to ask, but we can't bring these fish to you. You have to see and talk to them in person. Finally, there is the Chinese bahaba fish. We have already sent people to catch it at the estuary, but now there is only one fish. It may take some time to get 8 fish. Looking at Zhang Hai, Sun Yuan whispered. Chapter 448. Ah. In the hotel room, Feng Yunchen's voice came intermittently. On the big bed, the battle between Zhang Hai, Feng Yunchen, and Ai Xiaoxi continued. In the afternoon, when everyone left the agricultural trade center, it was already past 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Then, everyone took a car and went to the legendary Li family's restaurant. However, the Li family's restaurant was basically not much different from the Tan family's restaurant. The taste was really good, but the ingredients could only be considered okay. It was good to scare foreigners, but people in the country did not like it. Unlike the Tan family's restaurant, the Li family's restaurant did not allow people to order. Here, it was a set of dishes, and they could eat whatever was served. Even with Minister Qin following them, Zhang Hai and the others came according to the restaurant's requirements. After eating a delicious dinner, everyone returned to the hotel. After Minister Qin sent Zhang Hai and the others here, he took the initiative to leave. He did not look for Zhang Hai to tell him his purpose. Zhang Hai was also happy to be free. After Minister Qin left, Qili took the initiative to leave with Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi. For her, although she knew the relationship between Zhang Hai and them, she could not stay here. But he couldn't just watch them live here, and it seemed that Zhang Hai didn't have any intention of letting him stay. Since she couldn't get what she couldn't get, she didn't want others to get it easily. That was why Qili left with them. After sending them home, she didn't expect the two of them to take a taxi back. When the three of them met, it was naturally like lightning striking fire. Zhang Hai had not done this for a long time. Last time, he vaguely remembered that something bad happened with Selena Gomez. Since then, he had been relying on his left and right hand to live. So much so that he felt that his hand had a tendency to decline a little. As for Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi, since they came back, they naturally kept their chastity for Zhang Hai. In certain aspects, women would also think about things. Because of this, after the three of them met, there was no need to say much. The clothes disappeared in less than a minute, and then the battle began. After a full 3 hours, it was already midnight, and the battle came to an end. With Zhang Hai's physique that was twice as strong as a human's, he was able to fight 1 against 2 and win in the end. However, he was also very tired. With his physical fitness, it was not a very common thing to be covered in sweat. As for Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi, they were already like 2 piles of mud, unable to exert any strength. Looking at the sweat stains on their bodies, Zhang Hai carried them up and went to the hotel's jacuzzi. After filling the tub with water and changing the bed sheets, Zhang Hai carried them to lie in the jacuzzi. Feeling the impact of the water in the bathtub, Zhang Hai couldn't help but let out a long breath. This feeling was really great. How long are you going to stay this time? Leaning on Zhang Hai's chest, Feng Yunchen asked slowly. The day has passed, and they haven't found a chance to talk to Zhang Hai. I don't know, now that everything is almost done. Maybe I will leave soon. What about you? Have you thought about it? Do you want to go with me? Tightening his arms, Zhang Hai asked them. We haven't thought about it yet, because we don't know what identity we will be going to you with. Burying her head on Zhang Hai's shoulder, Feng Yunchen laughed at herself, and then said slowly. Hearing her words, Ai Xiaoxi on the other side also tightened her arms. As for Zhang Hai, his body trembled slightly, because he didn't know what to say now. As the mistress? That's obviously impossible. It's not that Zhang Hai is ruthless, but now that he is married to Qili, it's impossible for him to welcome the new mistress so blatantly. But if it's not as the mistress, what identity will it be? With other identities, Zhang Hai wouldn't be embarrassed, but what about them? Now, for the first time, Zhang Hai felt that all those harem novels and stallion novels that he had read before were all lies. Why would a woman be so loyal to a man after doing that with him? How much hatred can be wiped away with a smile? People are selfish. Zhang Hai wants to possess them, and they also want to possess Zhang Hai, but they know that they can't. It's precisely because of this that they have some entanglements, and this book has never had a mistress. I just hope that you can stay by my side so that I can take care of you, and you don't have so much pressure, but identity not now, in the future. Shaking his head, Zhang Hai said hesitantly. In the future. We'll talk about it in the future. If you have the heart, stay with us for a while. By the way, didn't you say you were going to Su Province in the afternoon? Just in time, we're going to Shanghai in a few days. Let's go together. Patting Zhang Hai's chest, Feng Yunchen said with a smile. In fact, she was just a little emotional just now. The moment she decided to be with Zhang Hai, she knew that in this life, she might not be able to wear a wedding dress and receive blessings from her family. Zhang Hai is a wild horse. If you fall in love with this guy, then you have to be mentally prepared. She's not young anymore. She and Zhang Hai are the same age. If she can stay by Zhang Hai's side, it should be not bad. As for Ai Xiaoxi, whether she still has a trace of longing or not, it has nothing to do with her. because she knows that AI Xueqi has the qualifications, but she doesn't. Feng Yunchen glanced at the girl who was also lying on Zhang Hai's body and glanced at her. What are you going to Shanghai for? Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment. He didn't hear that they were going to Shanghai. Besides, what are they going to Shanghai for? He really didn't understand. We're going to Shanghai to participate in CJ. We're models, we have to rely on this to make a living. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, AI Xueqi also smiled and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. That thing, didn't it start at the end of June? It should be the end of July, the plot requires the end of June, parallel space. It's only the beginning of June now, what are you going to do? Looking at AI Xueqi, Zhang Hai asked with some doubts. He used to be a shut-in, kind of a shut-in. After all, he didn't have much to do, so naturally, he also has a soft spot for the exhibition. CJ, also known as ChinaJoy. Its full name is Huaxia International Digital Interactive Entertainment Exhibition. At the beginning, the purpose of the exhibition was to give those game developers a stage to show themselves. But later, it slowly changed a little. It was now a competition of who could find the prettier TV girls, who wore less, and who was more ruthless, rather than a competition of the quality of the game. It was precisely because of this that some small game developers who made a lot of money here won a lot of attention and made a lot of money. Every year at this time, Zhang Hai will also refresh the pictures on the internet to see the benefits and so on. But later, those big game developers couldn't sit still, for example, Penguin. Although Penguin games can't be played without money. But after all, Penguin is still the #1 game developer in Huaxia. If they continue to play like this, their advantage will disappear. So in the past 2 years, they have also introduced a new policy that no longer allows the 3 vulgarities. Last year it was really good and it was quite tight. But there is no topic, even Zhang Hai, a fan of universal love, doesn't watch it, which means that there is really no one watching it. So this year, there is news that it should be appropriately relaxed, and it can't be as vulgar as before, but it can't be without a topic. However, Zhang Hai is already in the United States at this time, and he doesn't feel anything about this news. We don't need to sign a contract, we don't need to try on clothes, we don't need to walk on the stage. It is indeed opening on the 30th, but we need to prepare in advance. It will take about half a month to prepare in advance. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Feng Yunchen rolled her eyes at him. Is money so easy to earn? Even if it is a car exhibition, you have to prepare in advance. How to take photos with these cars, make expressions, and pose, these all need to be carefully planned. For example, most of the showgirls in CJ don't just go up and show off and pose for a while. They still need to perform some things, such as singing, dancing, and so on. They also need to know how to play the products they endorse. They can't be ignorant. It is precisely because of this that they need to go in advance and learn some things first. Especially when it came to learning how to dance, they had to practice for a period of time. Although they didn't practice dancing for the sake of debuting, it was like a group of girls who practiced hundreds or even thousands of times. However, they couldn't be too bad. After all, the manufacturers spend money not to let them make a fool of themselves. It is precisely because of this that they need to go in advance. Hearing Feng Yunchen's explanation, Zhang Hai also nodded, and at the same time, he calculated in his heart. Then let's go together when the time comes. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Hai smiled and said to Feng Yunchen. In any case, he was going to the Su province. The Su province was near Shanghai. Shanghai, Zhejiang province, and the Su province, these 3 places were close to each other. Usually, when they go there to play, they would go there together. Since they were going to Shanghai, then Zhang Hai might as well take Delina and the others to the Zhejiang province. The Su province was also a good place to play. Most importantly, he would be able to meet them more. Zhang Hai was a bit surprised. Really? That's great. Hearing that Zhang Hai is going with them, AI Xueqi also shouted excitedly. In fact, to be honest, in the beginning, Feng Yunchen and AI Xueqi didn't really want to go to CJ. Not to mention that it is tiring, the money is not much. They don't lack this money now, and the most important thing is that it is easy to be targeted by some rich people, which is very disgusting. The only advantage is that there is exposure. This is also something that they can't ignore, so they can only be careful. But now, Zhang Hai said that he wants to go with them, so they are relieved. Even if they don't go to work, it is good to go to play. Chapter 449. Shanghai, also known as Shanghai or Shen, was once the most popular city in Huaxia during the previous dynasty. Of course, it was so powerful at that time, not because of the imperial court of the previous dynasty, but because of the concessions here. Speaking of which, these concessions, in the eyes of Zhang Hai's generation, may be the shame of Huaxia at that time. The national strength was weak, so there were things like concessions. However, it was also because of these concessions that Shanghai laid the foundation of an international metropolis at that time. After the current imperial court was in power, Shanghai's development was still very fast. Now, Shanghai had faintly become the second largest city in Huaxia, second only to the existence of the imperial capital. Many international brands set their headquarters in Shanghai, which was also a symbol of national strength. This was the first time Zhang Hai came to Shanghai. Although he had been to the United States many times, Shanghai was the first time he came. After solving the matter in the imperial capital, Zhang Hai stayed in the imperial capital for a few more days. During these days, Qili would come over every day to be with Zhang Hai and the others. Gradually, Zhang Hai and the others also got used to the existence of this woman. Although in Zhang Hai's heart, he was still narrow-minded, he still couldn't let go of how Qili treated him in the past. Although he wasn't a resentful woman in the boudoir, he was still narrow-minded. He didn't have such a broad heart to forgive Qili for what she did in the past. However, now that Zhang Hai was rushing to get close to her, he was really not used to it. His attitude towards her was also slightly eased. In the next few days in the imperial capital, every day during the day, they either stayed in the hotel or went out for a walk. Although there were no scenic spots to go to, they still lived quite happily. In the evening, Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi also came over to be with Zhang Hai. The life of the three people was still very happy. After a few happy days in the imperial capital, it was also the day for Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi to go to Shanghai. After Zhang Hai also told Qili, everyone left the imperial capital. Although Qili also wanted to go, unfortunately, she still needed to keep an eye on the Qi group here. Therefore, only Zhang Hai, Feng Yunqin, Ai Xiaoxi, Penelope, Azalina, Daliana, and Marian sat in the first-class cabin on the flight from the imperial capital to Shanghai, because the two places were not too far away. The flight was still very fast, a little over 2 hours. The plane had already landed in Shanghai and Dongpu Airport. As soon as they got off the plane, the Four Seasons Hotel that Zhang Hai had already booked had sent 2 commercial cars to pick up Zhang Hai and the others. Originally, Zhang Hai and the others did not have much luggage. Even if they bought some in the imperial capital, it was not a lot. However, Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi's luggage was quite a lot. Just the underwear and makeup products had already occupied half of the suitcase. In this regard, Zhang Hai could only laugh. Of course, these so-called makeup products were more for maintenance. They were not contestants with heavy makeup, nor were they existences that would die in the light. Zhang Hai had seen them without makeup before. After getting off the plane, they sat in 2 cars. Zhang Hai, Feng Yunqin, and Ai Xiaoxi were in one car. Azalina, Penelope, Daliana, and Marian were in the other car. Zhang Hai booked a total of 4 suites in the hotel, and they stayed as they were originally. As for Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi, they were staying at Zhang Hai's place tonight. They would go to the dormitory tomorrow. Although it was only a collective training, it was still training after all. So after signing the contract, they needed to eat and live with the other girls for half a month. They could only leave after CJ ended. Of course, in addition to sleeping time at night, if they had other time, they could also come to Zhang Hai. After arriving at the hotel, everyone had a good night's rest. The next day, Zhang Hai and the others accompanied Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi to sign the contract. Then, everyone decided to play in Shanghai together. The company that Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi signed the contract with was also a top company in the country. Zhang Hai did not know the specific name. He had not played games for a long time. He heard that this time, their company showed a total of 3 games and also signed 3 groups of SG players. When he saw Penelope, Azalina, Daliana, and Marian, the person in charge wanted to sign them, but he was rejected by Zhang Hai. After signing the contract, everyone went to the nearby area to play. To be honest, if it was a normal young person, Shanghai actually had a lot of fun, such as bars, nightclubs, some big shopping malls, and so on. It was an international city. But for Zhang Hai, it seemed that Shanghai did not have as many fun places as the imperial capital. The imperial capital had the Forbidden City, the Great Wall, the Summer Palace, Fragrant Hill, Ho Hai, and so on. Although he did not have much interest in it, it was still a good place to play. As for Shanghai, to be honest, Zhang Hai looked at the map and really did not know what was there to play. There was a TV tower and a leftover stadium of the World Expo. When he saw the TV tower on the bund, he saw all of it. Other than that, there was nothing else to play with. Zhang Hai was not interested in buildings, science and technology museums, financial centers, and so on. If he came alone, he might go in and have a look. It was not very convenient to bring a group of women with him. Therefore, after a simple look around Shanghai, Zhang Hai and the others only stayed for 3 to 4 days before leaving. Although Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi were not professional dancers, they had started learning after all, so they had to be more attentive. They also did not have time to accompany Zhang Hai and the others. They left together and focused on preparing for CJ. As for Zhang Hai and the others, they continued south and went to other places to play. They first went to Hang City to see the legendary West Lake. But to be honest, West Lake was a big name, but when you really went to play, you would feel that it was a bit of a trap. For example, if you built a pond to raise some fish, it would be called a scenery. If you built a small bridge, it would be called a broken bridge. 18 miles was actually a very short bridge. It was called 18 miles because it was sent back and forth. If you put 3 stone altars in the water, it would also be called a scenery. Of course, there were historical stories and allusions, especially those romantic stories. For example, Su Xian and the White Snake, Liang Shanbua and Zhu Yingtai. Liang Shanbua had 105 brothers and 3 sisters. They specialized in robbing landlords and enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. They even attacked Zhu Yingtai's hometown, the Zhu family manor, 3 times. This enmity was irreconcilable. How could the two of them be together? It seemed like he had mixed up the books. But no matter what, Zhang Hai might not have liked this kind of elegant atmosphere. This could be seen from the animals he raised. In addition to the front teeth, he preferred powerful creatures, not cute ones. Therefore, he was naturally not interested in romantic love stories. He only liked to write love stories that moved people. But Penelope and the others still liked this place very much. They played here for many days. And these days, they also ate all the famous delicacies here. The most famous place here was none other than Lu Wai Lu. Of course, the food there was quite expensive, but Zhang Hai didn't care. After eating a meal, he concluded that it was a bit of a scam. West Lake fish in vinegar gravy, to be honest, most people weren't used to it. Song Fu fish soup. Zhang Hai was not used to eating it. Beggar's chicken soup. Of course, he was not used to eating it either. There were only 2 things that Zhang Hai liked to eat. One was the Longjing shrimp. Zhang Hai really liked to eat this. The fragrance of the Longjing, coupled with the elasticity of the shrimp, combined together, the taste was indeed quite perfect. The other one was the soup dumplings here. The crab roe, the pure meat, and the fresh shrimp all tasted quite good. These days, he had to eat this for breakfast every day. But other than these things, he was not used to eating Zhujiang dishes. They stayed at West Lake for 5 days and played for 5 days. Then they went to Wuzhen to play. Of course, this was a water town. After arriving, there was not much fun. After a simple tour of these 2 places, they went to Su Province, which was also the main target of Zhang Hai's trip to the south. In Su Province, they went to Nandu first. Nandu was the capital of the previous dynasty. It was also the first capital of the Ming dynasty. So, there were more things to play than Shanghai. Of course, the things to play here were things that Zhang Hai was more interested in. Some monasteries, Ming Shaoling, the presidential palace, and so on. There were more places to see. Although the scenic spots were not as grand as the capital, the quality was not bad. Most importantly, there were many things to see. After playing here for a while, Zhang Hai sent Delina, Marian, and Azalina back to Shanghai. Naturally, Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi were there to take care of them. Zhang Hai, on the other hand, had to continue south to Tongnan City. His goal this time was there. There were no scenic spots there, so Zhang Hai didn't plan to take too many people there. In the end, He only asked Penelope to go with him. After he was done, he would return to Shanghai and take Delina and the others back to the capital. Then, they would return to the United States from the capital. Not to mention Delina and the others. Even Jiang Hai was a little tired. But thinking of the development of his manor, he was still very happy. After arriving in Tongnan City, Jiang Hai and Penelope took a good rest in the hotel for a whole day. After adjusting their bodies to the best state, the two went to their destination this time, Hai County. The target they were looking for this time was located there. The Huayang Group. Speaking of this group, it was very famous in China. Its main business scope was special products of aquaculture. This time, the Chongjiang swordfish that Jiang Hai wanted was a product of the Huayang Group. If he wanted to buy it, he had to come over and negotiate with them. Fortunately, the higher-ups had already informed them. When Jiang Hai called to say that he would come over, the people here had already sent a car and a person to take Jiang Hai and the others to the Huayang Group's precious fish breeding and scientific research base. That was the real place. Chapter 450. 1234, 2234, 3234. In a spacious classroom in Shanghai, Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi, and a row of more than a dozen girls were wearing loose dance costumes, pressing down on a sissy in front of them. Oh, sorry, it was a gentleman. Following the gentleman's posture, they also danced. The song they were dancing now was the main song of a Korean girl group, called Cat Steps, and the name of the girl group was AOA. Of course, if Jiang Hai was here, he wouldn't understand at all. He didn't have a good impression of Korea at all. The only thing he knew seemed to be the era of thighs. It was also because for a period of time, Fu Yuan was very obsessed with this thing, and every day there was a chicken. Of course, it seemed that whether it was the difficulty of the dance or the uniformity, Feng Yunchen and the others had no way to be compared with a regular girl group, but there was a sense of temptation when they were twisting and turning there. Okay, girls, let's take a break. After one more time, tonight's performance will be over. After all, they were models. Good models may not sing well, but their figures were very good. And most importantly, because of the needs of filming, their bodies were very flexible. Even if some of them were stupid, it wasn't a problem for them to remember the dance steps of this song, not to mention that it had been reduced. So after this dance, the sissy was very satisfied. He clapped his hands and said with a proud face, "Phew." As soon as they heard his words, everyone here breathed a sigh of relief. Some of the physically weaker ones directly sat on the ground. Some of the physically stronger ones, such as Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi, still had the strength to walk to the corner, pick up a bottle of water, and drink it while relaxing their physical strength. This kind of practice was quite intense for them. Sister Chen, I'm exhausted. Let's go eat tonight. Just as Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi were resting here, a young girl crawled over with a dispirited look on her face. She blinked her eyes and said to Feng Yunchen. Feng Yunchen and Jiang Hai were the same age. They were both born in 1988. This year, they were already 27 years old. According to China's nominal age, they were already 28 years old. Logically speaking, at such an old age, they were actually not very active in this circle. After all, in the circle of young models, the replacement was very fast. Basically, if they were 25 years old and not popular, the company would ask them to take some more revealing photos. Youth and beauty had nothing to do with them. They would go for the sexy style. Then use their bodies to earn some money, or hook up with a rich man, and then retire. Of course, there were also those who didn't get anything, and they might end up participating in some kind of service work. It was rare for a girl of her age to participate in an event like CJ's unless she was specially invited. Otherwise, a normal SG would not let such an old girl be one. Feng Yunchen was an exception. Because the current Feng Yunchen really didn't look 27 years old. Her skin was very smooth and very white. According to the people of the company who selected the candidates, Feng Yunchen's body had a youthful aura, and at the same time, it also had a sense of a mature sister. Such a perfect appearance was naturally very attractive, especially those little boys who longed for a sister's love. There was no resistance, so for Feng Yunchen to join, everyone raised both hands in approval. As for the rest of the girls here, except for Feng Yunchen, there was not even a 25-year-old girl. The oldest was Ai Xiaoxi, 23 years old. There were 3 other girls who were also 23 years old. The rest were 21, 20, 18, and 19 years old. These people were all high school students. Maybe they didn't study well, but they also came out to earn money. The girl who talked to Feng Yunchen just now was the youngest girl here. She was only 16 years old this year and had just graduated from junior high school. However, she didn't have to worry about taking the high school exam because she had already passed the art school exam. When the time came, she just had to go through the motions. After coming here, this girl was still very likable. She didn't have anything to do, nor was she spoiled. She just liked to eat. You still want to eat? If you continue to eat, you will become fat. Hearing the girl's words, AI Xueqi couldn't help but laugh. Hey, I'm still growing. Hearing AI Xueqi's words, the girl couldn't help but raise her head and said impatiently, Okay, you can eat whatever you want. Looking at her appearance, Feng Yunchen and AI Xueqi laughed, then said to her. Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, the little girl also raised her fist excitedly. Looking at her appearance, Feng Yunchen couldn't help but think of her past. She used to be so naive. But fortunately, she met Zhang Hai, and Zhang Hai is her support. Call Deliana and the others later and see if they have eaten tonight. If they haven't eaten, let's go together. Shaking her head, Deliana shook the thoughts in her mind and said to AI Xueqi with a smile. Right now, they were not short of money. Since the two of them had already shown their loyalty, Zhang Hai would not treat his women badly. When he was in the capital, he opened 2 bank cards, each with 10 million yuan in it, instantly raising him to the highest level of personal customer, and then gave one to each of the 2 girls. 10 million yuan is nothing for the current Zhang Hai. But for ordinary people, as long as they don't smoke or gamble, 10 million yuan is not a problem for them to live a peaceful life. This is also to let Feng Yunchen and AI Xueqi have no worries. In the beginning, when Zhang Hai wanted to give them money in the United States, they were not willing to accept it. But now their mentality has changed, they are not too pretentious and accepted Zhang Hai's card. So now these 2 girls are completely rich, but they are still very low-key, and are not envied by others. This is also the reason why Feng Yunchen can do well here for so many years. She does not cause trouble, and others do not provoke her. This is the most important thing. Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, AI Xueqi also took out her phone and sent a WeChat message. It just so happens that Deliana, Marian, and Azalina are watching TV in a suite at this time. After receiving the WeChat message, they agreed to go out to eat without hesitation. Anyway, they have nothing to do. At this time, Zhang Hai has been in Sea City for a day. Today they have a good rest, booked 2 rooms, and after a simple meal with Penelope, they went to sleep. The next morning, they have to buy grenadier anchovies. Early the next morning, a minister of the Huayang group has already driven a car and is waiting downstairs of the hotel where Zhang Hai is staying. To be honest, the Huayang group is not very interested in Zhang Hai. After all, Zhang Hai is here to plunder their research results. Everyone knows the purpose of Zhang Hai is here. He came for the Yangtze grenadier anchovies. However, they have just succeeded in breeding this fish, and there is no way to raise it artificially. Zhang Hai came to rob them, which makes their superiors very dissatisfied. But even if they are dissatisfied, they have to give it to Zhang Hai. After all, this is a notice from the imperial court, which is not something they can disobey. The Huayang Group was established in 1995, and it can be cultivated and paid attention to. Of course, it is inseparable from the support of the imperial court. This was the only difference between China and the United States. In the United States, governors were elected. If a governor was appointed by himself, he could disobey the president. But if a high-ranking official dared to disobey the emperor, he would be courting death. But if a high-ranking official dared to disobey the emperor, he would be courting death. Even senior officials dare not disobey the imperial court's decision, let alone a provincial enterprise with the imperial court's shadow behind it. For example, arrange a person with a high level to greet Zhang Hai, and give him whatever he wants, as long as they don't lose money. When Zhang Hai went downstairs, the minister of the group and his driver have been waiting for a long time. Seeing their flattering smiles, Zhang Hai smiled a little embarrassedly. In fact, he cleaned up very quickly. But Penelope can't. Even if she hurries, it will take her 20 minutes to clean up. That's why she is so famous. I'm sorry. Women are more troublesome. I'm Zhang Hai. Hello. Looking at the person in front of him, Zhang Hai stretched out his hand with a smile, and the man immediately took Zhang Hai's hand with a smile on his face. It's okay, I understand. Come this way please. Shall we go to the group first, or directly to the research institute? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the minister was not angry and continued to smile. Usually, only others would wait for him. After he reached this position, he almost never waited for others. But Zhang Hai has the imperial court's shadow behind him, so he has to hold back even if he has any opinions. Let's go directly to the research institute. Zhang Hai doesn't want to see the faces of those bureaucrats. He came here for those species. Other things don't matter. He is not here to take advantage of others, so it is better to go straight to the point. He doesn't like to beat around the bush. Okay, then let's go. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the minister also smiled. In fact, not only does Zhang Hai not want to see those people, but those people also don't want to see Zhang Hai. They don't like a guy who comes to rob the fruits of their labor. The four of them got in the car and went to their destination this time. In the car, the minister also introduced the Huayang Group to Zhang Hai. Although the Huayang Group's main achievements are in aquatic products and agriculture, this group is still very big. The leading company is naturally the Aquatic Products Company. In addition to that, there is also the Puffer Franchise Company, Huazhou Real Estate Company, Nanhua Real Estate Company, Sankai Real Estate Company, Huaheng Real Estate Company, Huaxing Human Resources Company, Huahui Investment Company, Financial Management Company. It can be said that this is a huge monster. Not only is it involved in agriculture, aquatic products, but also logistics, real estate, finance, insurance, wealth management, etc. This is also Zhang Hai with the imperial court's halo. If he came here by himself, they probably wouldn't even pay attention to him, let alone sell him seedlings? Sell my ass. He has to admit that sometimes, favors are really useful in China. Chapter 451. Along the way, the minister did not make Zhang Hai feel bored. He could always find something to talk about. For example, he asked Zhang Hai what he did for a living. After learning that Zhang Hai was a cattle farmer, he did not show any disdain. A cattle farmer could be recognized by the imperial court. This showed how big this guy's cattle farm was in the United States. Now he was also raising fish. This guy was definitely not as simple as he said. But Zhang Hai was not willing to say more. He could also use Zhang Hai's words to extend the topic. For example, when Zhang Hai talked about the cattle farm, he would tell Zhang Hai what kind of pasture the cattle should eat, what they should eat in spring, summer, autumn, winter, the storage of green fodder, the proportion of soybeans, etc. It could be said that this guy was indeed very good. He might not have raised a cow before, but he was quite familiar with these things on paper. After talking about cows, he talked about sheep, then horses, and then unknowingly he talked about traveling. When it came to tourism, the minister had a lot to say. After listening to him, Zhang Hai was also very inspired. At the same time, he also knew that Zhang Hai had also developed a tourism route in a small town in the United States. He could not help but nod in his heart. He knew that Zhang Hai was not that simple. After asking about the town's situation, he also gave Zhang Hai a lot of suggestions. For example, the party could not only be organized by the town's residents, but also by the tourists. For example, the tour group could be a unit of people. They could not let the locals help them prepare some ingredients, light a fire, etc., and then watch from the side. They could host their own party. This would be much more comfortable. As for the food, the tourists could also do it themselves. They could go fishing, go hunting in the mountains, and most importantly, there were no cultural attractions in the town. Zhang Hai could set up an Indian museum or a simple museum of American history in the commercial street. This could attract some people who thought they were noble to visit the town. It was not just for entertainment and play. Hearing the minister's words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. This guy is amazing. What he said, Zhang Hai had never thought about it before. But now that he thought about it, it was true that if he went out with a large group of people, if he kept hosting the party according to the other party's habits, they would also feel uncomfortable. It was better to go out alone. It gave people a refreshing feeling and also a sense of freedom. As for the commercial street, if it was purely for commerce, it might really not work because tourists nowadays were quite disgusted with shopping. Of course, it did not rule out the possibility that some groups were purely buying groups. However, most of the tourists were not willing to buy things. Under such circumstances, they needed to be attracted to that street. A free museum could allow them to understand the history of the Native Americans and the history of the United States. Of course, the United States didn't seem to have any history, but it could also inspire the superiority of the people. It was really a good idea. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but quietly remember this in his heart. When he went back, he would discuss it with Mayor Wallace and do it. He had to admit that these officials were really smart. While Zhang Hai was thinking and the minister was talking, they arrived at their target this time. To be honest, this aquaculture company was really beautiful. After the car stopped, Zhang Hai and the others walked out. As soon as they walked out, they saw a sea of trees. It was like a piece of spiritual jade on a boundless seashore. Gorgeous European-style buildings were hidden in the sea just like that. In 1995, the Huayong Group and an investment group in Singapore had spent $30 million to build this place. $30 million in 1995 was equivalent to $300 million now. It might even be more than that. Not only was there an aquaculture company, but there was also a botanical garden. Of course, Zhang Hai didn't know much about plants. He wasn't very interested in these things. His goal here was to buy aquaculture, that was all. Under the guidance of the minister, Zhang Hai walked into the aquaculture park with him. As soon as they walked in and saw the diagram in front of them, Zhang Hai's eyes couldn't help but light up. This time, he really came to the right place. In this aquaculture park, there were not only Yangtze River grenadier fish, but also many conservation Yangtze River precious aquatic products. The first thing that Zhang Hai and the others saw after entering the park was the white-fin dolphin, Huaxia's most famous aquatic creature. This kind of national first-class protected animal was naturally not sold here. Zhang Hai wanted to buy it, but he couldn't buy it no matter how much money he spent. They were here to reproduce the next generation. This was also a breeding dolphin. After giving birth to a child, the child would be released back to the Yangtze River. Looking at the big white dolphin in front of him in the water tank in front of him, Zhang Hai also raised a lot of dolphins in his home. He was still a little close to this kind of creature. Compared to dolphins, he preferred sharks, but there were no sharks here. After briefly looking at the white-fin dolphin for a while and taking 2 photos, Zhang Hai and the others continued to walk inside. This research institute studied all the precious fish in the Yangtze River. Among them, the Yangtze River grenadier fish was actually not the most endangered species. Not to mention the white-fin dolphin, there were even more precious fish behind. For example, the next thing they saw was the white sturgeon. The white sturgeon was the Huaxia spoon-snout sturgeon. This kind of fish had a close relative in America. It could grow up to 2 meters and had a huge mouth. However, this kind of white sturgeon was a special product of Huaxia. It was a national first-class protected animal, slightly more than the white-fin dolphin, but also limited. There were a total of 2 groups here, which meant that there were 16 fish. In addition to the white sturgeon, there was also the Dartmouth sturgeon, which was also a kind of sturgeon, but it was also a national first-class protected animal. Walking inside, Zhang Hai saw another kind of fish. This kind of fish was very beautiful, and its back was pink. If this fish was sold, the price would be higher, but unfortunately, no one dared to sell it, because this fish was called rouge fish, which was also a national protected animal. The strength was not so strong, but it was also a second-class protected animal. It was not easy for Zhang Hai to get it. After looking at a lot of protected animals, they finally came to the fish that Zhang Hai was most concerned about. It could be sold for money, which was the fish area that had successfully multiplied. Of course, the fish here was still quite expensive. The first thing that Zhang Hai saw was the pufferfish area, which was also the largest area in this place. To be honest, this thing could be found everywhere. There were pufferfish all over the world, but a long time ago, except for the Japanese, no one ate it. There were a total of 54 kinds of pufferfish along the coast of Huaxia, and the annual output reached 3 to 4 million tons. This kind of fish was not very rare in this area. But because there were too few people who could cook this kind of fish, the price of this kind of fish was still a little expensive. Although the meat was fresh and tender, and the taste was quite good in Zhang Hai's mouth, there were still a few people who could eat it. Basically, most of the pufferfish were only eaten along the coast and the Yangtze River. Although Zhang Hai liked to eat it, he didn't know how to cook it, so he endured it. Behind the pufferfish, there was a kind of fish called the round-mouthed copperfish. This fish belonged to the carp family, and it looked similar to a carp. Now it had been artificially cultivated, so the price was not very high. Zhang Hai had this fish for dinner in the hotel last night, and the taste was not bad, so Zhang Hai was not too interested in it. Behind it, there were long thin loach, rock carp, and other economic fish. To be honest, Zhang Hai didn't know much about these fish, and he didn't particularly like them. Because he wanted to buy fish, if the fish was not extremely delicious, then it was extremely expensive. After all, he was in this line of business. Therefore, he was not interested in ordinary fish. As for some fish species that were not precious to begin with, such as some common Asian carp, he could catch them in Winthrop. There were plenty of Asian carp there, and they were all wild. However, Zhang Hai was not interested in all the fish. Among them, there was one that Zhang Hai was slightly interested in, which was another one of the 3 delicacies in the Yangtze River, the Chinese herring. This kind of fish could be found in the Yellow Sea, the East China Sea, and the Zhujiang River, so Zhang Hai was not in a hurry to introduce this kind of fish. Because of this, Zhang Hai just looked at it and walked back. Soon, they came to the breeding area of the Yangtze River grenadier fish. This is the breeding area of the Yangtze River grenadier fish. We can produce about 400,000 fry every year, but less than 100,000 can successfully grow to 1 year old. If these fish want to live, they have to be released back to the river to live in the sea after 1 year old. We started releasing 100,000 fish the year before last. In the end, we were able to recover about 1,000 fish. This is the situation where we raised them until they were 1 year old. These fish are really difficult to raise. Looking at Zhang Hai, the minister sighed. It is said that the crying child gets the milk. Although Zhang Hai didn't know if these numbers were true, he knew that the minister was complaining about being poor. Although the number of seeds produced by the Yangtze River grenadier fish was not particularly large, it was definitely not small. After all, it was a fish, not an ordinary mammal. Even if it was really as he said, to recover 1,000 fish, not to mention matching 500 or even 100 fish, at least millions of eggs could be harvested, and then hundreds of thousands of small blade fish would be hatched without a problem. Now that artificial reproduction has been achieved, mass production may not be too far away. How many of these fry do you have now? Zhang Hai asked directly, ignoring the minister who was crying about being poor. At present, there are a total of 500,000 fry in this institute, all of which are more than 1 month old. Hearing that Zhang Hai ignored his words, the minister also smiled. Sure enough, Zhang Hai was not so easy to fool. I want half, you name your price. Looking at the minister in front of him, Zhang Hai said seriously. Chapter 452. Half. 250,000? That's impossible. It's very different from what we discussed at the beginning. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the minister shook his head before he could make a bid. This number was not acceptable to them. Of course, the number of 500,000 was actually nonsense. He said that there were only 500,000 fish here. In addition, there were also Chongjiang grenadier fish in the Huayang group. However, even if Zhang Hai knew that, he wouldn't care. Because it's impossible for him to buy all of these anchovies. What he wants can be achieved here. When these anchovies are transported back to the United States, Zhang Hai will inject some aura into them. When the time comes, they will be easy to raise. 250,000 anchovies, in just a few years, forming a population is not a problem. It's precisely because of this that Zhang Hai dared to say so. We talked about 70 yuan per fish. I'll pay 80 yuan now, Zhang Hai said calmly while looking at the minister in front of him. 250,000 fish, plus 10 yuan, would be 2.5 million yuan. Zhang Hai wouldn't even blink when he added it up. If these 250,000 fish seedlings were sent to him, it wouldn't be a problem to raise 100,000 fish. When each fish grew half a catty, he would sell them in China. According to the current price of fish, 1 or 2 kilograms of fish would sell for about 400 yuan per catty, and 1 or 2 kilograms of fish would sell for 1,000 yuan per catty. Selling half a catty of fish at 6,000 yuan per catty was not excessive. Zhang Hai's $800 would sell them in China for 4,800 yuan per catty. 100,000 fish would be 50,000 catties, which would be $40 million. If these fish grew for another year and gave birth to some small fish, how many would he sell? If he were to sell them next year, he would have no idea how many fish he would sell. A million fish would be worth $400 million, which was much more expensive than the red fish in the United States. Even the yellow fish would not be able to compete with it. This was only 1 million fish. What if it was 10 million? Who said that fish farming was not as profitable as cattle farming? That depended on what kind of fish you were raising. 80 yuan, this won't work either. Hearing Zhang Hai's bid, the minister hesitated. On one hand, he was tempted by Zhang Hai's temptation, and on the other hand, he was under pressure from the imperial court. To be honest, he was a little tempted by 80 yuan, but he couldn't sell it so easily. 100 for one tael. I want 250,000 taels. Seeing that the minister was a little tempted, Zhang Hai didn't say anything and directly increased it to 100, which was another 5 million. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the minister couldn't help but gasp. I need to ask the higher-ups. When he heard Zhang Hai's words, he knew that he couldn't be too greedy. So after hesitating for a moment, he went to the side and made a call to the higher-ups. Zhang Hai squatted by the pool and looked at the little fish swimming in it. These guys were really swimming gold bars. No, they were even more expensive than gold bars. How about this? Let's each take a step back. My boss wants to sell 91, but we can only sell it for 200,000. About 10 minutes later, the minister came back and looked at Zhang Hai and said with a serious face. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai smacked his lips. Although there were less than 50,000 taels, Zhang Hai could be regarded as having achieved his goal. 200,000 taels it is. At the moment, he stood up. Since he had already decided, there was no need to hesitate anymore. Then he followed this person to the head office of Huayang Group and signed a contract there. Zhang Hai spent 18 million renminbi to buy 200,000 seedlings of Yangtze River grenadier fish. Huayang Group was responsible for sending these seedlings to Zhang Hai's manor and guaranteed that the survival rate before the seedlings entered the water was more than 90%. That was to say, of the 200,000 taels, at least 180,000 had to be alive in the end. If not, Zhang Hai could refuse to buy them. After signing the contract, Zhang Hai first transferred 8 million RMB, and the remaining 10 million would be transferred once the fish arrived. The people of Huayang Group were very satisfied with this. Although they still felt a little distressed, it was a pleasant surprise to be able to sell one tael for 90 yuan. Of course, the most important thing was that they didn't believe that Zhang Hai could raise these seedlings. However, when Zhang Hai's first batch of fish entered the market of Huaxia next year, they would know what it meant to raise a tiger and invite calamity. Was Zhang Hai's grenadier fish an ordinary grenadier fish? Each of them was a fine product. After signing the big contract, Zhang Hai stayed here for one more day. Naturally, he had to attend the banquet in the evening. However, the people of Huayang Group saw that Zhang Hai took Penelope with him, so they didn't arrange anything else for Zhang Hai. However, Penelope and Zhang Hai actually didn't have that kind of relationship, and Zhang Hai didn't have the mood to flirt with this girl. Of course, the most important thing was that Zhang Hai didn't know how to flirt. Usually, the girls would take the initiative to flirt with him, and then he would be reluctant. Now that he was asked to take the initiative, he really didn't know how to do it. So they spent the night like this. The next day, they returned to Shanghai. After staying in Shanghai for a few more days, Zhang Hai didn't wait for the opening of CJ. After spending a few days with Feng Yunchen and the others, he returned to the capital with Delina, Marian, Azalina, and Penelope. Of course, when he was in Shanghai, he also got to know the girls who practiced with Feng Yunchen and treated them to a good meal. However, he didn't have any feelings for these girls. He only did this to let them take care of Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi. After spending a few more days with them, Zhang Hai returned to the capital. After resting for a day in the capital and having a meal with Qi Li, Zhang Hai went to look for Du Feimin. These days, Du Feimin represented the Arabian region and had almost finished the negotiations with the imperial court. Now that the oil price had been negotiated, they still had some differences on the amount of oil to be delivered. Huaxia was a big oil user, and oil was naturally the most important thing in the world now. Not only cars needed it, but also planes, tanks, and even artillery vehicles needed it. However, Huaxia was a country that lacked oil. In order to deal with a possible war, they had to have a lot of strategic reserves. Currently, Huaxia's oil mainly came from Siberia, which was Soviet Russia. Now that they could have one more line, They naturally hoped to have as many as possible. However, Du Feynman didn't dare to sell too much. He just didn't want to put all his eggs in one basket, and didn't want to directly change baskets. However, these were all small matters. As long as he was willing to sell, it was the best thing for the imperial court. And Zhang Hai naturally came to look for him for his oil futures. After having dinner with Du Feynman at his villa, Zhang Hai had an extra $600 million worth of oil futures. Although $1 billion wasn't a lot, $1 billion worth of oil futures should be enough to guarantee Zhang Hai's safety in the United States for the time being. If a giant wanted to kill Zhang Hai, then Zhang Hai could use this $1 billion as a stepping stone. If he were to seek refuge with the Rockefeller family or the Morgan family, with the protection of these great families, although he would have a hard time, it would still be impossible for them to make a move on him. Naturally, he wouldn't take it out unless he had no other choice. After everything was settled, Zhang Hai's return to the country also came to an end. Then, they boarded a flight back to the United States. Because he had already received the news that Sun Yuan and the Huayong Group had reacted quickly after receiving his deposit. With the money in place, naturally, everything was done quickly. The imperial court came forward to rent a large cargo ship, and the things that Zhang Hai wanted had already been quarantined under the United States security. After all, these things were going to enter the United States. Naturally, they needed the help of the United States Customs to deal with them. They quarantined them to see if there were any diseases. Of course, the most important thing was to check if there were any chips or the like inside. Of course, there were none of these things. These were the most basic fish and animals. The 200,000 fish seedlings of the Huayong Group, the tea plants and animals that Zhang Hai bought the other day, and the 3 million large yellow croaker seedlings from Guangdong province were included. Now, after catching 8 Chinese bahabas, the ship could set sail. They could take 2 routes. One was to cross the Pacific Ocean, then enter the Atlantic Ocean from the Gulf of Mexico, then go all the way up to Zhang Hai's territory. The other was to go through the Strait of Malacca, then cross the Indian Ocean, and enter the Atlantic Ocean. Compared to the latter, the former route was a little longer, but it was safer. Therefore, the imperial court decided to take the first route. The estimated time of arrival would be in the middle of July, which means that it would take more than a month. When Zhang Hai returns this time, he will be busy with a lot of things. Not to mention other things, he has to dig the river first. Although the large yellow croakers and Chinese bahabas were marine fish, the Yangtze River grenadier was a freshwater fish. He had to have a freshwater river area. Moreover, he was preparing to raise some other freshwater fish. With Xiao Ya, his master, he could not waste it. As for digging the river, this needed to be studied. The machine was easy to get. He just needed to get the construction team that was building the town here. It would only take a few days to build a river. However, how to use the river, whether to draw water in or to dig an underground hole, this needed to be studied by Zhang Hai. Moreover, the direction was very important. He wanted the Yangtze River grenadier to swim into the sea and also to swim back into the river to lay eggs. It was definitely not possible to swim up and down, and it was also not possible to make it too complicated. Moreover, he had to ensure the integrity of the grassland. It seems that I have to find a specialist to study it when I go back. Sitting in the first-class cabin of the plane, Zhang Hai sighed helplessly. His brain had become a little rigid after not using it for too long. Zhang Hai had been used to solving problems with money. If money could not solve it, violence would solve it. Schemes and tricks, beautiful women painted skin, they had nothing to do with him. Now, he suddenly had to consider these things. He was really a little confused, but then he laughed again. This time, he really gained a lot from the trip to Huaxia. First of all, the guy who wanted to kill him was dead. His safety could be guaranteed. Second, he also got the connections of Du Feynman and the imperial court. Although Zhang Hai did not want to touch these 2 connections, in case something happened in the future, he could protect himself. Most importantly, he got a lot of delicious food. Chapter 453. Phew, we're finally back. Zhang Hai walked out of the airport with a slightly tired body. He couldn't help but stretch. Although Zhang Hai and the others were sitting in the first class, which was much better than the business class and economy class, they were still very tired. After all, they had been on the plane for more than 10 hours. It would be strange if they weren't tired. Even he was like this now, let alone Delina and the others. They were so sleepy that their eyelids were fighting to stay open. However, the sun was still very bright. It was not the time to sleep yet. From the United States to Xueqi, a flight of more than 10 hours was bearable. However, the most unbearable thing was jet lag. What time was it when you boarded the plane? What time was it when you got off the plane? If you only looked at your watch, it would be hard to imagine that you had already spent more than 10 hours in the air. That was how jet lag passed. Come on, cheer up. Don't sleep yet. If you sleep now, you will wake up in the middle of the night. The next few days will be difficult. Let's go back first. Zhang Hai glanced at the girls behind him. Except for Azalina, all of them were very tired. After all, what did Azalina do before? Not to mention sleeping in the first-class plane, she could even sleep in a small sampan. Because she had to maintain her strongest fighting power at all times, she didn't have insomnia at all. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Delina and the others yawned and stretched. They said listlessly, "Oh." Looking at them, Zhang Hai also smiled. The 5 of them took their luggage and left the airport. When they went to the airport, each of them only had a small bag. But when they came back, they took a lot of things. As Zhang Hai said, they didn't have anything to buy when they went to the airport, but they couldn't just leave the things they bought there. For example, some underwear, and some small souvenirs that Daliana and the others had bought for them. Before they left, Chili specially bought a lot of delicious food for them. These needed a place to store them. Therefore, when they left, they carried a small bag and were empty-handed, but when they came back, they each carried a box. Walking to the parking lot, Zhang Hai's battle shield was already covered with dust. There was nothing he could do about it. The dust at the airport was huge. This was inevitable. The dust wouldn't become smaller just because it was America. After putting everything in the car, Zhang Hai restarted the engine. A car worth 20 million yuan was indeed very powerful. After not moving for such a long time, the engine roared to life as soon as he pressed the start button. Zhang Hai used the glass in front of him to brush the glass so that he could at least see the road clearly. Then, he led everyone out of the airport. However, he wasn't in a hurry to go back to Boston. Instead, he deliberately went to the nearby New York first, had lunch, and then washed the car. After that, he drove to Boston with a brand new car. He first sent Penelope back to her home in Boston, but obviously, Penelope didn't want Zhang Hai to know where her home was. She got off in front of the block where her home was located. After telling Zhang Hai that she would summarize the contract, she left. Zhang Hai, on the other hand, led the rest of the people back home. Finally, after a long time, of course it was just a long time, Zhang Hai and the others returned to the manor again. Just as they opened the door of the manor. Woof woof. In the distance, Little Huang, Chirpy and Bucktooth. Oh, and the 2 capybaras who were playing by themselves, quickly ran over. It was obvious that Zhang Hai and the others missed them a lot when they weren't around. When the car stopped, everyone also walked down with their luggage. As soon as Zhang Hai got out of the car, Little Huang and Xiaobai pounced on him and almost pushed him down. Bucktooth had already climbed up Zhang Hai's trousers and was lying on Zhang Hai's hair and constantly rubbing against it. All right. Zhang Hai patted Little Huang and Xiaobai's heads and stood up with a smile. These guys were really enthusiastic. After rubbing them hard, Zhang Hai patted Bucktooth on his head and Chirpy, who had been jumping next to him. The current Xueqi, if one only looked at its size, was no smaller than an ordinary white-headed sea eagle, but it still couldn't fly. Every day it jumped and walked, and of course it ran very fast. Zhang Hai wondered if this guy was a cross between a white-headed sea eagle and an ostrich. If it wasn't for its long legs, he would have taken Chirpy for a DNA test. Looks like I'll have to teach it to fly after a while. Looking at Chirpy, Zhang Hai also made up his mind. He couldn't let it jump on the ground all the time. How could it still look like a bird of prey? It was clearly a big chicken. On the other side, Delina and Marion were also very enthusiastic about their capybaras. Although capybaras looked a bit silly, they were actually very smart. At least they could recognize people. Moreover, they almost didn't have any temper and were surprisingly good-tempered. These days, they had also become familiar with Delina and Marion. After not seeing them for so many days, they also missed them very much. And Delina and Marion had also been thinking about these guys. They had to admit that these guys were really quite attractive. And looking at the appearance of Zhang Hai's family of 3, Azalina shrugged her shoulders. She even wanted to raise an animal. Jiang, you're back. Perhaps because the movement outside was too loud, at this time, the door of Zhang Hai's villa was also open from the inside. Aphrodite, who was wearing an apron and tidying up the room, saw Zhang Hai come back, and she also called out excitedly. Looking at Aphrodite's appearance, Zhang Hai also chuckled, put down little Huang and Xiaobai in his arms, walked in front of Aphrodite, and gave her a hug. Feeling Zhang Hai's hug, Aphrodite's heart was 70% gratified and 30% happy. If Zhang Hai could directly carry her back to the room at this time, that would be the best thing for her. But unfortunately, she also knew that this was impossible. Now that she could have a hug, it was already good enough for her. We've really troubled you these days. We brought you gifts. After hugging, Zhang Hai took the initiative to let go of Aphrodite, then said to her with a smile, then walked into the room with the suitcase. At that moment, everyone also walked into the room. After hearing that Zhang Hai was back, everyone in the manor rushed over. Anyway, at this time, the work was already over, so it didn't matter whether it was earlier or later. Instead, it was more important to understand the situation from their boss. As time passed, the first to come back were Dulles Gerard, O'Connor Murphy, Dinah Taylor, Hilda, and the others who were busy at the winery. Because the grapes were not ripe yet, they had to wait until September to harvest. Now, there was nothing to do except to get rid of the insects. Then, the furthest ones were Edouard Anderson, Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, Andrew Christian, and Marlon Rupert. Of course, their families arrived at Zhang Hai's house one step ahead of them. Because Zhang Hai was back today, although he was a little tired, he still planned to hold a party, so they came over to prepare dinner first. Not only did they come over, but Philemon Turner's wife also came over. Now she was the leader of these women. The last ones to come back were Robbins Garcia, Philemon Turner, Burke Dollar, Harriman Fells, and Belle Lester. Looking at the crowd that filled the living room on the first floor, Zhang Hai's smile never disappeared. In this world, there were so many people who were worried about him. Although Zhang Hai also knew that many of them were worried about him because he was their boss, and if they lost him, they wouldn't be able to find such a good job. But it still made Zhang Hai very happy. The most important thing for a person to live in this world was to let others remember him. Thinking back to a year ago at this time, he might have died at home and no one would have known. Life was really unpredictable. The wheel of fate was just rolling forward, and everything was pushed one by one. Zhang Hai was not so bad, because he didn't lose himself because of the skyrocketing wealth. He didn't want to become the richest man, nor did he want to enter the political world. He was a man who followed his desires. He knew contentment, so he was very calm. After the crowd arrived, everyone began to busy themselves. Most of the women were preparing dinner, and Zhang Hai and the others began to distribute the gifts before dinner. Americans were very willing to accept gifts, but they didn't have the habit of returning gifts. Naturally, when they give you a gift, you don't need to return a gift. This was a matter of opinion. Zhang Hai, Delina, and Marion prepared gifts for everyone. After all, Azalina wasn't familiar with Robbins and the others, so she didn't prepare any gifts. She only prepared one for Aphrodite. This was because when Zhang Hai wasn't here, Aphrodite was the one who delivered food to Azalina. Among these people besides Zhang Hai, Aphrodite was the one who was most familiar with her. Azalina gave a silk scarf. She bought it when she went to the Zhejiang region. The silk there was quite famous. A small piece of silk scarf cost her a few hundred yuan. Naturally, it was made of pure silk. Zhang Hai's gifts were also similar to these. He didn't lack money, so naturally, the gifts he gave were all very good. On the other hand, Delina and Marion's gifts were very cheap. For example, some souvenirs and hats with 5 red stars sewn on them. These things were cheap, but they also represented their sincerity. Naturally, Zhang Hai's gifts were very expensive. For example, Robbins and the others gave some things with regional characteristics. For example, some ivory carvings, some wood carvings, some wooden pipes and so on. There were a lot of huaxia gifts, and the women gave silk scarves. This was also because of Azalina's inspiration. Although it wasn't cheap, Zhang Hai didn't care about the money. The silk scarves in Hang City were not big, but they cost a few hundred. Even the most expensive ones would cost a few thousand. It was really not cheap. Chapter 454. By the way, where are Bernice and Xueqi? After giving out the gifts, Zhang Hai found that there were still two things in his hand. It was a pair of Hetian jade bracelets, pure white jade without any impurities. This was the second time Zhang Hai returned to the capital, and he specially got it from Fatty Wang. This pair of bracelets was worth 120,000 yuan. This was also the gift Zhang Hai prepared for Bernice and Xueqi. Zhang Hai bought 4 of the most expensive gifts this time. This pair of bracelets, a necklace, and a ring. He had already given the necklace to Aphrodite, and now Aphrodite was playing with it. The ring. He prepared to give it to Xueqi, but it was up to her to see if she could understand his thoughts. As for the bracelets, they were theirs, but he didn't see them here, which made Zhang Hai a little surprised. Could it be that they left? Speaking of which, Zhang Hai felt a little sorry for these two girls in his heart. After all, they had helped Zhang Hai in the past. Zhang Hai had already agreed to treat the other party's illness. In the end, after the other party came, Zhang Hai didn't treat the other party's illness. Instead, he ate the other party's cooking every day. In the end, the other party almost lost his life. So, he felt somewhat apologetic. Among the gifts he bought this time, their gifts were naturally the most expensive. Zhang Hai hoped that this gift could make up for his heart. But after giving out the gifts, he didn't send out these two things, which made him a little puzzled. Xueqi and Bernice should still be in my villa. Although they know that you are back, isn't it a little inconvenient for them now? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Aphrodite touched the necklace Zhang Hai gave her and said in a daze. What she was thinking now was, what did Zhang Hai mean by giving her this necklace? Did he want to tie her up for a lifetime? Oh, I forgot. I'll send it to them. Seeing that the sun hadn't set yet, Zhang Hai patted his head. He had forgotten about this, so he couldn't help but stand up and prepare to leave. Boss, everything is almost ready. Should we start the fire first? Seeing that Zhang Hai was about to leave, Philip stopped Zhang Hai and said anxiously. A party in the United States naturally had to be popular. As for Zhang Hai and the others, other than some cold dishes and soup, everything else could be roasted. Fish, prawns, and meat, it was not interesting to just grill them with charcoal. It would be more fun to make a fire. Zhang Hai was in charge of his own manna. It was not the first time he had done something like this. Naturally, there was nothing to hesitate about. Start the fire first, I'll be back soon. Hearing Philip's words, Zhang Hai also smiled and then left the room. It has been almost half a month since Zhang Hai left. In this half a month, Zhang Hai's villa has almost been renovated. The outer walls were all new, and now there is a smell of paint and gum. Of course, Zhang Hai is not short of money. The things he uses are the best. These things are not industrial products and are harmless to the human body. Especially the gum, these are real gum, 100% pure natural products, and are not harmful to people. But although the outside is almost done, Zhang Hai's room is simply cleaned. Because before the room was redone, Zhang Hai had already called back. His room, shop, and He Tianyu's room have already been booked. Naturally, there is no need to redo it. He just needs to wait for He Tianyu to come over. As for Zhang Hai these days, he will live in the guest room. Anyway, he has a lot of guest rooms here. But although the house has been renovated, Bernice and Xueqi did not move in. Because in such a big room, except for Zhang Hai's animals, only the two of them are living here. They are also a little scared. Rather than this, it is better to live in the small villa. Zhang Hai is also familiar with Aphrodite's villa. After leaving the villa, he has already walked to Aphrodite's villa. From far away, he has already seen Bernice standing on the second floor looking at him. When she saw him, Bernice's cold face showed a rare smile. It is obvious that she is very happy to see him back. Hi! Walking to the bottom of the villa, Zhang Hai waved at Bernice, but when she saw Zhang Hai saw her, Bernice's smile disappeared again, then she turned her head, ignoring Zhang Hai, and disappeared from the second floor. Seeing this scene, Zhang Hai couldn't help but laugh. What is this situation? What does it mean? If he has a real girlfriend, he will understand that this woman is angry, but unfortunately, Zhang Hai has no girlfriend. So he just touched his nose, then he opened the door and walked in, and went straight to the second floor. But just as he walked to the stairs, He saw Bernice with her hands in her pockets, looking at Zhang Hai with a proud face. You still know to come back. I thought you had already forgotten us sisters. Looking at Zhang Hai, Bernice said with a face full of displeasure. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but touch his nose. Why do these words make me feel like a heartless man? Oh, this is little Ya's situation. It's not easy to leave here, otherwise, I would have taken you with me. But now is not the time to pay attention to this matter. Zhang Hai was originally apologetic, and his tone couldn't help but soften. TCH, we won't go even if you take us. What are you doing here? Hearing Zhang Hai's explanation, Bernice's eyes couldn't help but show a hint of joy, but then it disappeared, and she restored her proud look. Yes, I came to give you gifts this time. Hee, I have a party there, let's go together in a while. Looking at her appearance, Zhang Hai raised his hand and said with a helpless look. Hearing that Zhang Hai came to give gifts and saw 2 gift boxes, Bernice showed an expression of, you know your place. Then she took Zhang Hai into little Ya's room. As soon as he walked in, Zhang Hai saw a white world again. He hadn't seen little Ya for many days, but her expression was still the same. The pure white elf was sitting in the white corner, looking at the thick book in front of her. When she heard the sound of the door opening, she raised her head. When she saw that it was Zhang Hai, little Ya's face clearly showed a smile. You're back, how did things go? Looking at her, Zhang Hai also walked over with a smile, but he only took 1 step when he was stopped by Bernice, who then pointed at his feet. At this time, Zhang Hai remembered that he should pay attention to little Ya's room. He couldn't help but shrug helplessly, put on the shoe covers next to him, walked in, and sat opposite little Ya. Things have been done, so I came back immediately. Here, these are the gifts I brought for you from Xueqi. You and your sister each have one. Looking at little Ya, Zhang Hai handed over the box inside. After little Ya took it, she took the initiative to give one to Bernice. The 2 sisters looked at each other, then opened the box in front of them, but when they opened it, they couldn't help but be surprised. This is too expensive. Although they didn't know much about jade, they weren't stupid. At a glance, they knew that Zhang Hai's 2 bracelets must be expensive. They were not relatives, so it was somewhat inappropriate to give such expensive gifts. Don't say that you don't want it, and don't return it to me. You know, I don't lack this money. Speaking of which, this gift is also because I feel sorry in my heart. You said that you came to treat your illness, and I haven't cured your illness yet, but you almost lost your life because of it. This is also my apology in my heart. If you don't accept it, I will feel uneasy. Looking at the 2 women's expressions, Zhang Hai first raised his hand, then said to them with a self-deprecating smile. Actually, you don't need to think like this, we don't care very much. Such an exciting thing is not so easy to encounter, right sister? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, little Ya smiled, then looked at Bernice next to her. Humph. However, Bernice still didn't give Zhang Hai a good look, and she was still in Tsundra Buf. Okay, accept it. At night, move back to my villa. I will start treating your illness tomorrow, and it should not take long for you to recover. Looking at little Ya, Zhang Hai said with a serious face. Really? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, this time, not only little Ya, but Bernice also turned her head and looked at Zhang Hai with a shocked face. In fact, Bernice had already given up hope for little Ya's illness. This kind of illness, there was no cure in the world. The reason why she brought little Ya here was also a desperate effort. Later, she found that the environment here was good, and Zhang Hai was also a good person, so she wanted to let little Ya stay here for a while as a vacation, which was also good. But she didn't expect that Zhang Hai now actually said that he could really cure little Ya's illness, and the sisters couldn't help but be shocked. Thank you. Looking at Zhang Hai, little Ya nodded seriously and said with a sincere face. You don't have to say thank you to me, we are friends, aren't we? Haha, well, let's change the topic. We can't keep talking about your illness, right? It's still quite early before dark. Hearing little Ya's words, Zhang Hai laughed and said loudly. Dark? What do you mean? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, little Ya was a little confused, and looked at Zhang Hai with a cute face and asked. I have a bonfire party at my place. If you don't participate, you won't have enough people. When it's dark, we will go there and have a good meal tonight. With a clap of his hands, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Hearing his words, little Ya couldn't help but be a little speechless. But then she also laughed. A party, she seems to have never participated in this kind of thing. Looking at her sister's longing look, Bernice wanted to say something, but she didn't make a sound when she opened her mouth. She knew that although her sister had been smiling, in fact, her heart was more bitter than anyone else, because she knew that if she showed a painful expression, she would be in more pain, so she had been enduring like this. She really wanted to go now. With Zhang Hai, nothing will happen. Chapter 455. Fix the route. Isn't the left side a little high? Put the things in the distance. While driving, listening to the shouts in his ears, Zhang Hai slowly poked his head out of the window and looked at the busy people in the distance. Since Zhang Hai transferred the money to Winthrop, Winthrop started to build. They first found a commercial street in the center of Winthrop, not far behind the town's church. Then they started to work for the people on the street. It was all about money. The United States was different from China. All the land in China belonged to the government. If a developer wanted to develop the land, it would be easy for problems to arise. However, it was different in the United States. The land here belonged to the people. If the town government wanted to use the land, they had to discuss it with the people. Fortunately, the people in Winthrop knew that the tourism development and benefits did not belong to the town government, but to them. Therefore, they were quite happy to sell their land and houses. Especially when the town introduced the idea that they could use their previous properties to exchange for a house, they were even happier. The processing speed was very fast. After all the people had moved away, the town began to be built according to the drawings drawn by the designer that Mayor Wallace had specially found. The first thing to be started was the expansion of the shooting range, because it was the simplest, but it occupied a large area. When Zhang Hai went to Huaxia, the main part of the shooting range had been expanded. Now, the interior was being renovated. They needed to paint some fireproof materials and soundproof materials. Next was the construction of the town's commercial street and seaside villas. These two projects started together. As for the other things, such as the horse ranch, fishing boat, private manor, school, party square, fishing grounds, and so on, they were easy to get. The most difficult things were these things. According to Moses Adams, it would take about 2 months to finish all these things. Now, almost a month had passed, and the main part of the shooting range was almost done. Winthrop hired a total of 3 construction teams to build here. There was one in Winthrop town, and the other 2 were from Boston. After all, they were working for money and had nothing to do with other things. Therefore, the quality of these people's work was quite good. However, because of the construction, the main road of Winthrop, which might not be congested even once in 100 years, was a little congested today. Not only was there a lot of traffic, but the traffic was also very slow. Usually, it would only take Zhang Hai about half an hour to travel from the manor to Winthrop town, and this was considered a slow drive. However, he had been driving for an hour today, and he had just entered the town not long ago. It could not be helped. However, driving slowly was not without benefits. At least he knew that he was quite popular in Winthrop. Zhang Hai was a relatively introverted and unique person. He did not like to talk or communicate with others. He preferred to live in his own circle and world. Therefore, it had been almost a year since he came to Winthrop. However, other than the people in his manor, the number of people he knew in Winthrop town could be counted with one hand. The residents in the town were also unfamiliar with Zhang Hai. The Boston area could be considered one of the most xenophobic areas in the United States. The worst was probably Texas. The people of Texas were quite xenophobic towards both black and yellow people, except for Houston. Fortunately, Zhang Hai didn't ask for help from others, and he also had money. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for ordinary people to live here. You can't expect the Americans to take the initiative to care for you. This was simply impossible. However, Zhang Hai did a lot of good things this year. He let the people of Winthrop know him. First, he funded the reconstruction of the collapsed classrooms in the elementary school. Now, he invested money in Winthrop to promote tourism. This was a very good thing for the town and its residents, because not only did they have more opportunities to work, but they also had more opportunities to make money. Therefore, 90% of the town's residents were very grateful to Zhang Hai. The remaining 10% may be conservative, but they didn't resist Zhang Hai. So when Zhang Hai slowly drove in, a lot of people nodded to him in greeting. This made Zhang Hai want to add more money to invest, but he knew that he couldn't because he had no money now. He originally had close to 1 billion in cash. He had spent 250 million on the town investment and 600 million on oil futures, so he only had 150 million left. He needed about 70 million to buy Hetian jade, and he also bought a lot of random things in China. This was close to 100 million. He only had less than 40 million in liquid funds in his bank account. Fortunately, the tax was due next year, so Zhang Hai did not have to worry about it now. However, he really did not have any extra money now. Therefore, he was prepared to go to sea again after receiving the fish seedlings and other things sent from China. Anyway, those sunken ships in the Caribbean are useless. Instead of just staying there, it's better to let him take the things on them and sell them for money. With this experience, Zhang Hai's heart became more and more wild. According to the sea charts he bought, there were at least 6 more sunken ships that he could move. He did not expect each of these 6 ships to be like the first one. There was also the Spanish Emperor's golden helmet, but as long as there were those jewels, it would be a good thing. If one ship was worth 300 million, then the 6 ships would be worth 1.8 billion. Apart from the 1 billion he needed to buy oil futures, he still had 800 million in capital. It would be convenient for him to do anything, right? As the saying goes, if you have money in your pocket, you will not panic. Now that Zhang Hai had spent all his money, he was indeed a little panicked. However, it did not cost much to dig a freshwater river. Zhang Hai had told Robbins and the others yesterday that he wanted to dig a freshwater river. Last night, while barbecuing, Zhang Hai had discussed it with Robbins and Ai Dehua. The two of them were very calm about Zhang Hai wanting to dig a freshwater river because they did not eat freshwater fish. Therefore, it was difficult for them to understand why Zhang Hai wanted to dig a freshwater river. However, since Zhang Hai said he wanted to do it, then they would help Zhang Hai think of a way. In fact, it was quite easy to dig a river. The soil and water in Zhang Hai's place would not be lost. The grasslands and the like were deeply rooted. The river did not need to be too deep, about 1.5 meters deep. This depth would not drown people or cows. It also did not need to be too wide. About 4 meters would do. After all, Zhang Hai was here to raise animals. The bottom layer was sand, which was directly transported from the seaside and reinforced by the river. The entire river could be made quite good with just a few $100,000. As for the source of the river, it would be more troublesome because it was easy to use the river water from Winthrop. It did not cost much, and they only needed to dig the river. However, it was easy to cause disputes. After all, the river did not belong to Zhang Hai. Therefore, Zhang Hai decided to dig the source, which meant digging a spring. Digging a spring would cost $30,000, and it was not like he could not afford it. However, it still had to be said that labor in the United States was indeed expensive. If it was in China, it might not even cost $800,000. However, this was the United States, and the cost was in dollars. Naturally, the domestic price could not be compared to the domestic price here. The Boston area was quite rich in both freshwater and seawater resources, so Zhang Hai did not have to worry about it at all. After discussing it last night, Zhang Hai finished his run this morning. After eating breakfast, he drove over. He was going to find Mayor Wallace and ask the designer he knew to take a look at his manor and design a river that could enter the sea. At the same time, he was going to find the construction team to discuss how to dig the river. Driving all the way to Winthrop, Zhang Hai looked at the construction team in front of him, looking for Mayor Wallace. According to Moses Adams, the person in charge of the town hall now was not Mayor Wallace, but Shite Clive. Mayor Wallace Kirk was at the construction site almost every day. If Zhang Hai wanted to find him, he had to look here. Sure enough, before he reached the town center, Zhang Hai saw Mayor Wallace in a hard hat at the intersection of the commercial street that was being built in the distance. Beside him was a big man who was holding a piece of paper and saying something to him. Mayor Wallace. Looking at the two people here, Zhang Hai called out first. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the two people also raised their heads. After seeing Zhang Hai, Mayor Wallace smiled and waved his hand. After parking the car in an open space in the distance, Zhang Hai jumped out of the car and walked to Mayor Wallace. Hi Zhang, I heard that you went back to Huaxia. When did you come back? Seeing Zhang Hai coming over, Mayor Wallace was very excited. Looking at his town changing every day, it would be strange if he was not excited. I just came back yesterday. Looking at Mayor Wallace, Zhang Hai said with a smile. You just came back yesterday. Why didn't you rest at home today? What are you doing in town? Buying something? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also knew that the long-distance flight was very tiring, so he asked with some doubts. No, I'm here to find you. I want to open a river channel in my manor, so I want to find a construction team and a designer. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Zhang Hai explained his intentions to him. But hearing what Zhang Hai said, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but be stunned. Just like Robbins and AI de Hua, he also couldn't understand why Zhang Hai wants to open a river channel. Maybe rich people like to do this. You don't need to find a designer to open a river channel. This is just a small project. Let me introduce you. This is Hut Charles. He is from our town and is now the person in charge of building the commercial street. You can find him for this. Chapter 456. I know him. He was the one who built my airport, Zhang Hai said with a smile when he heard Mayor Wallace's introduction. Indeed, Zhang Hai knew this person called Hut Charles because he was the one who built the airport. However, Zhang Hai built the airport on a plain, so in addition to a hangar, he only needed to flatten the land and build a runway. The amount of work wasn't big, but it was very troublesome. It took less than a week to build the airport, so naturally, the cost wasn't much. Zhang Hai also met the head of the construction team. It was this Hut Charles. Yes, Mr. Zhang. Are you satisfied with the airport? Hut Charles smiled when he heard Zhang Hai's words. Hut Charles's current position was what Hua Xia called a contractor. But in the United States, contractors were not only responsible for the workers, but also the machines. They were also called construction companies. However, although they were called a company, they did not have many people or machines. A project as big as the Winthrop development was not something a small company like theirs could handle. Therefore, they had to work with many companies to do it. In the United States, there were many small companies like this. They could also take on some public or private projects. If it was in China, these companies were not qualified to take on the project. But in the United States, most of the projects were done by these small construction teams. Zhang Hai also heard of Hut Charles. He was an old resident of Winthrop. His parents were still in Winthrop, but he lived in Boston. It was easier to get a project there. This time, Winthrop was built. He used his connections to get the construction rights of the town's commercial street. As for the other two companies, one was building roads and expanding the shooting range, and the other was building seaside villas and expanding the pier. Of course, don't think that just because he knew them, he could do anything. This was a private project, not a government project. The people in each department were either Wallace's confidants or Moses Adams' people. If these people found that their hands and feet were not clean, then it wouldn't be as simple as going to jail. They couldn't rub sand in their eyes. If they wanted to make money, then Zhang Hai would naturally let them make it. But if they didn't want to make money, then they would go to jail. Obviously, these three companies knew that Winthrop and Zhang Hai were not to be messed with. The quality of the project was quite good. Very good. Are you all right now? If not, come with me to my manor to have a look. Hearing Hut Charles's words, Zhang Hai nodded and said excitedly, it was indeed a good thing to solve this problem. Not now. I still have to discuss with Mayor Wallace about the merchants in the commercial street. The foundations of the 12 houses you want have already been laid. We still need to lay the foundations of the other merchants one by one, so we need to discuss it first. But I should be free in the afternoon. I'll go to your place to take a look then. Building a house in the United States was not a simple matter. In China, if you don't want to buy it, then you can leave. But in the United States, every house has been sold, so you have to build it according to the owner's wishes. If the owner wants to build a rectangular shape, then it will be a rectangular shape. If the owner wants to build a square shape, then it will be a square shape. If the owner wants to build a trapezoid, then it will be a trapezoid. If the owner wants to build a trapezoid, then it will be a trapezoid. Zhang Hai was quite satisfied with Hut Charles's seriousness. Okay, then in the afternoon, I will go to the town first. Originally, Zhang Hai was thinking of taking him directly to the manor. But now it seemed that he had something to do, so Zhang Hai didn't say much. In the afternoon, then so be it. He didn't care about the time. Besides, it was not easy for him to come to the town. It would be unreasonable if he didn't go to see Xueqi. More importantly, he still had a gift to give her. After saying something to Mayor Wallace Kirk, Zhang Hai got in the car and drove to Winthrop. Now the traffic in the town was really not very good. It was only from the commercial street to the town hall. Zhang Hai drove for half an hour. After parking the car, Zhang Hai walked into the town hall. But as soon as he walked in, his forehead began to sweat. It seemed that it was really busy here. All the employees in the town hall were running around at this time. Even when they were running, they were still making phone calls. This was because the town government did not ask these construction teams to provide labor and materials. The materials were provided by the construction teams themselves. What the construction sites lacked, what they needed, 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 what they needed. There was also an advantage to doing this, and that was that they were well aware of the type of steel bar. There was no chance of secretly changing it. They had to ensure that it was 100% sturdy and there would not be any problems. With such a workload, they were naturally very busy. Apart from the construction team, there were also the residents of the town. There were also those who had temporarily moved away, housing issues, environmental issues, and so on. There were originally 8 workers in the town hall. Now, 4 of them were in charge of several construction sites. Only 4 people were definitely too busy, so Mayor Wallace specially recruited 12 more people. Now there were 16 people here, but they were still very busy. Xueqi was one of the leaders among these people. She was in charge of the construction of the seaside villa, so she was always busy. When Zhang Hai walked in, he saw that she was holding a stack of documents while talking on the phone. Her eyes were also looking at the screen, which made Zhang Hai feel a little distressed. After hesitating for a while, Zhang Hai called Xueqi after hanging up the phone. "Hi, Sandy." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, many people in the town hall looked at Zhang Hai. When they looked at Xueqi, there was a trace of ridicule in their eyes. The relationship between Zhang Hai and Xueqi was not a secret in this small town. "Why are you here?" Xueqi shyly looked at the gazes of the people around her, then ran over with a stack of documents and said to Zhang Hai with a guilty conscience. She knew that she had been too busy recently, and her relationship with Zhang Hai seemed to have cooled a little. But she had no choice. She was a businesswoman, so she could not give up her job. Moreover, Mayor Wallace specially asked her to come here to help. "I came to see you. If you don't come to see me, then I can only come to see you." Hearing Xueqi's words, Zhang Hai helplessly spread out his hands, then said to Xueqi. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xueqi also chuckled. Obviously, she was very satisfied with Zhang Hai's words. "Don't talk nonsense. I'm also very busy here. If I'm not busy for a while, I'll probably be able to relax." Looking at Zhang Hai, Xueqi patted him a little embarrassedly, then said with some expectation, "All right, it's almost noon. Let's go have lunch together." Hearing her words, Zhang Hai knew that she still had a chance with him, so he smiled. Although she suddenly became busy a while ago, which made Zhang Hai feel a little uncomfortable, in his heart, the best candidate to be his wife was still Xueqi. "I can't help it. Sorry, I'm really too busy here. Wait a while, when the town is built, I'll invite you." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xueqi sighed. In fact, she really wanted to go, but the problem was that she couldn't go now. In the end, she sighed helplessly, knocked her head with a headache, and said with slight annoyance, "That's a pity. All right, I brought you a gift from Xueqi. I hope you like it." Hearing that he was rejected, Zhang Hai also sighed. It seemed that he had to wait for a while. But after saying that, Zhang Hai took out the Hatian jade ring he brought back from China and handed it to Xueqi. Xueqi opened it and saw that it was a ring. Her face immediately turned red. Everyone knew the meaning of a ring, but Xueqi hesitated because she really hadn't thought about it. "I'll take it. I'll invite you to dinner later." She didn't wear it in front of Zhang Hai, which meant that she didn't give Zhang Hai a clear answer. At the same time, she didn't refuse, but put away the ring and said to Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai knew Xueqi's hesitation, so he nodded. After hugging Xueqi again, Zhang Hai left the town hall. When he walked out of the gate, he couldn't help but sigh. It seemed that there was still a lot of trouble ahead. However, he didn't say much. Xueqi didn't reject him, but she also didn't accept him. This was already within his expectations. He still had to live, so he had to look forward. When she was at her busiest, she would give him an answer. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai sat back in the car and went to the Mexican restaurant near Winthrop where Xueqi took him to eat. After buying some food, Zhang Hai drove back to the manor. Not long after he arrived at the manor, Hurt Charles also came. He didn't rush to talk about the price, but he first took a helicopter with Zhang Hai and circled around the manor. Hurt Charles originally studied design when he was in university. After looking at Zhang Hai's territory and Zhang Hai's request, he had already outlined a river in his mind. After getting off the helicopter, he began to talk to Zhang Hai. It would be best if Zhang Hai's river went around the cattle farm and the forest in an S shape. The starting point would be at Zhang Hai's villa, and the estuary would be near the forest. The benefits of this way were that it wouldn't destroy the grassland. Secondly, because the forest was near the estuary, it could ensure that the soil there wouldn't be lost. Thirdly, it could take care of all of Zhang Hai's requests. Chapter 457. According to my design, this river will not be too wide. Most importantly, Mr. Zhang, you are not only doing this for fish, right? After they got off the helicopter, Zhang Hai brought Hurt to his mansion. Hurt drew a simple diagram in front of Zhang Hai. On the diagram, the river he designed for Zhang Hai was very interesting. It was N's shape that rotated 90 degrees to the left. The head of the shape was near Zhang Hai's mansion. After that, he drew an arc so that the river would go around Zhang Hai's residential area, but it would form a natural barrier in front of Zhang Hai. This way, the temperature would be very comfortable in the summer. At the same time, it would be easier to catch fish in the future. After that, the river would continue to go around the residential area. It would go around the vineyard and grassland until it reached the forest. Then it would change into a straight path and flow into the sea. That way, the empty space behind the vineyard could be used to store some of the animals that Zhang Hai wanted to raise. Zhang Hai did not only build this river for fish. He also needed fresh water for the pigs, chickens, and goats that he imported from China. In order to prevent these animals from making the water smelly, he could not put them at the source. If he put them near the forest, they would be eaten easily. After all, there was a family of mountain lions living there. Therefore, he could only put them at the back of the vineyard. The river would go through the pigsty, sheep pen, and chicken coop. It would be easier to take care of them. It would not be like Zhang Hai's pheasant coop and wyvern coop. It was very troublesome to take care of them once, and they would attract a lot of insects. So he could move them all there. Although designing the river this way would cost a lot of money, it would ensure that the grassland would be intact. This was what Zhang Hai wanted. Okay, then let's dig like this. When do we start? Zhang Hai looked at Hurt and said with certainty. Sigh, Mr. Zhang, you are too impatient. Before we dig the river, we need to dig a well first. Also, we need to talk about the price. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Charles couldn't help but shake his head. This Zhang Hai is really rich and overbearing. Oh, go ahead. Hearing Hurt's price, Zhang Hai smiled awkwardly. He was indeed used to being rich. After that, Hurt told Zhang Hai about the price of the construction. Digging a well was actually just digging the source of the river. This cost had to be calculated separately from the cost of the river. This was because it was very troublesome to find water, dig a well, and reinforce it. This cost was actually not less than 1/3 of the cost of building the river. According to Charles Hart's price, for a 20-meter deep well, he would give Zhang Hai the first 3 meters for free. After 3 meters, he would charge him $320 for every meter. Zhang Hai knew that this price was very reasonable. It was even a little cheap. Other companies would even charge him $400 or even $500. Of course, if it was in Nevada or Arizona, $1,000 per meter would be a fair price. What a joke! If he wanted to dig a well in the desert, $1,000 per meter wouldn't be considered cheating. From 20 meters to 150, each meter would cost $470, according to Charles Hutt's calculations. Zhang Hai's river was about 7 kilometers long. Because there were a lot of bends in the middle, and because it was not very deep, it did not have a lot of water. It needed about 400 tons of water. Winthrop had a lot of underground water. When the well was about 13 or 14 meters deep, it would definitely produce water. However, the amount of water produced was not very accurate. It was very difficult for a well to produce more than 100 tons of water. Zhang Hai would need to dig 4 or 5 wells, or dig a deep well. This way there would be enough water. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai did some calculations in his mind. If he wanted to drill a well with 5 holes and a depth of 20 meters, the cost of drilling the well would be very cheap, around 20 to 30,000 yuan. The cost of reinforcing the well and storing the water would be around 50 to 60,000 yuan, which wasn't too expensive. Although it was twice as expensive as he thought, $30,000 and $60,000 did not make much of a difference to Zhang Hai. Therefore, he immediately decided to drill. As for the money for the river outside, according to Hut Charles, he would be responsible for digging the river and adding the riverbank. He would also help Zhang Hai transport the sand from the beach. He did not need to pay for this. This did not include the electric wires and street lights. He would charge Zhang Hai $32,000 for the river. Later, Zhang Hai said that he wanted to build a few bridges in the middle of the river. He could not just not cross the river. He also wanted to plant trees on both sides of the river. In fact, this was also a sudden idea from Zhang Hai. In the past when he ran, he always ran on the grassland. But now, he could run on the riverside. A round trip of 14 kilometers was also a warm-up. When they heard Zhang Hai's words, although Robbins and the others felt that it was unnecessary, Zhang Hai had done a lot of unnecessary things. As his subordinates, they did not need to say anything. Zhang Hai could do whatever he wanted. But after hearing Zhang Hai's words, Hut Charles also started to think about it. This was because for him, this was also a source of income. In the end, he decided to pay Zhang Hai for everything. He originally wanted to dig the river, streetlights, and trees from Zhang Hai's forest, but Zhang Hai did not agree. If he wanted to transport them from the Alabama mountains, he would pay Zhang Hai $61,000 per kilometer. This price was still within Zhang Hai's acceptable range. Although he did not want to sell tickets for a park, the most important thing was that he felt comfortable. The initial price for the river was $427,000. The problem of the estuary was solved by Hut Charles directly for Zhang Hai. At the same time, the price of digging the well was around $60,000, which was within Zhang Hai's acceptable range. Therefore, there was nothing to say. He signed the contract and started to work. The total value of the contract was less than $500,000, so there was no need to show it to Moses Adams. After Zhang Hai sent the contract to Penelope, Penelope finished reading it in a short time. She said that there was no problem. Zhang Hai signed his name with Hut Charles, and at the same time, transferred $100,000 to Zhang Hai. Once the money was in place, Hut Charles was ready to start. That night, he went back to find people. The next day, Hut Charles's men arrived first. Digging a river was done carefully, and they didn't just start digging. First they had to dig the hole of the well. After determining the location, they would dig the river. However, they didn't dig the soil at the hole of the well. Instead, they would dig the river at a distance. After the river was built, they would dig the hole of the spring and let the water flow out. This would form a small river. Zhang Hai didn't understand this, but he didn't mind watching the fun. Hut Charles took a few people to the left of Zhang Hai's villa and started to check. Winthrop had a lot of underground water, so it did not take long for them to confirm the location. Zhang Hai had never seen a well before, so when these people came, Zhang Hai took the initiative to go over and look. Seeing Zhang Hai come over, Hut Charles thought that he was afraid of not being able to get water, so he took the initiative to go over and explain. Mr. Zhang, don't worry, we have dug at least 400 wells, so we can definitely get water here. Let me explain. I think you know that inside the earth is the core, the liquid layer, and the crust we are standing on is actually a layer of hard rocks. There are many cracks in these rocks, and there is a lot of underground water. Winthrop has a lot of fresh water, so we can definitely get water here. Oh! Hearing this, Zhang Hai could not help but smile awkwardly. He could not say that he was just here to watch. After choosing the location, Hut Charles did not care about Zhang Hai anymore. It was not a secret anyway, so he started to work on the machine with his colleagues. Drilling was not as simple as it seemed. Just a drill was enough. In addition to the drilling machine, there was also a mud machine, a machine to mix the mud, and a machine to pump the mud. In addition, there was also a machine to put cement on the side. Once the water came up, they would have to start digging the well and solidify it with soil. Anyway, every profession had its own way of doing things. Zhang Hai looked at it for a long time, but he still did not understand it. However, the machine had already started to work. With a rumbling sound, the drill went into the ground. Winthrop had a lot of rivers and seas, so there was a lot of water. Not long after, mud appeared, but Hut Charles did not stop. He continued to drill. Although water began to come out, the amount of water that came out was small. It was not a problem for ordinary people, but it was difficult to make a river out of it. As more and more water came out, it meant that they were drilling in the right place. At the same time, the mud machine also started to work and moved the mud to the side. But as the water got deeper and deeper, Zhang Hai felt that the aura in his body suddenly moved. Then he saw that the water that came out of the drilling machine was faintly releasing water vapor. Hut Charles had seen normal water vapor before, but it was not possible for it to come out like this, and it seemed like it was coming out more and more. At this time, Hut Charles could not help but walk to the place where the mud was. He gently touched it with his hand, and a flash of shock appeared on his face. "It's hot. This is a hot spring?" Hearing Hut Charles's words, Zhang Hai was also stunned. He immediately ran to the side and touched it with his hand. Sure enough, this was a hot spring, the water was hot, and the temperature was not low. What the hell, it really is a hot spring. Zhang Hai looked at the warm water that was still covered with mud. There was also a slight smell of sulfur. Zhang Hai could not help but be happy. On the other side, Hut Charles had already brought the drill out again. Looking at the water that was about 2 meters deep, Zhang Hai could see that the water was indeed hot. He used his thermometer to measure it. The temperature was as high as 42 degrees Celsius. As he drilled deeper, the water would definitely get hotter. It was indeed a hot spring, and it was also a natural one. Seeing this, Zhang Hai could not help but be happy. It seemed like his luck was not bad. Chapter 458. Do you want to continue? Hut Charles looked at Zhang Hai and asked. For 90% of the people, digging out a hot spring was something to be happy about. After all, Americans also wanted to soak in hot springs. However, there were some religious people who didn't like hot springs. Therefore, as the person digging the well, Hut Charles had to ask first. Of course, let's see how big this hot spring is, Zhang Hai said excitedly. Hearing what Zhang Hai said, Hut Charles also began to investigate how big this hot spring was. First, he dug the hot spring to a depth of 5 meters. After making sure the hot spring was not small, he continued to dig. Then, he dug 4 wells nearby. 3 of them were about 3 meters deep, and hot springs popped out. It was not rare for construction teams to dig hot springs. They had already figured out the approximate location of this hot spring. Mr. Jiang, I have to admit that you are very lucky. This hot spring is definitely not going to be developed into a holiday village. But if you want to use it alone, you can do it even if you have 10 times more people. Charles said with an envious look on his face. After some investigation, Zhang Hai's hot spring area was about 3,000 square meters in size. 3,000 square meters was not very big. It was 50 meters horizontally and 60 meters vertically. It was not very big, but it was not a problem to connect a few water pipes or make a hot spring pool. Ah, this is a great deal. How about this? I will dig out this place and make an outdoor hot spring with rocks. Looking at the hot spring in front of him, Zhang Hai squinted his eyes. He couldn't help but think of some SW movie files in a hidden folder in his computer's D drive. There were a lot of movies in the hot spring. For example, A Wife, A Party. Ahem, Zhang Hai didn't know when he became an experienced player. Logically speaking, he didn't seem to be holding back that much. When he was in Shanghai, he even had sex with Feng Yunqin and Ai Xiaoxi. Why did he have such dirty thoughts? That's not a problem. Is it the Japanese style? Drilling and expansion will cost about $50,000. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Hut Charles also looked at Zhang Hai with a knowing look and gestured 20,000 renminbi. No problem. Looking at his gesture, Jiang Hai also patted him. Naturally, there was no problem. These were all trivial matters. Although they had already agreed on the price, Charles did not immediately expand the hot spring. This was because he needed some other tools to build a bathhouse. Other than the buildings above ground, the underground was also very important. For example, if the mouth of the hot spring was opened, then the top of the mouth of the hot spring would naturally need to be covered with metal. The bottom of the mouth couldn't be made of sand, but stones or tiles. The depth could not exceed 1 meter. After all, they were going to soak in the hot spring, not swim in it. In addition to the buildings above ground and the stones, this required a lot of work. Therefore, they only surrounded the foremouth of the hot spring with cement. Then they went to dig the mouth of the well. Therefore, the mouth of the well had to be moved further away. But it was only a small distance, so Charles didn't ask Jiang Hai to pay extra. This time, water started to come out when they were 3 meters deep. At 10 meters, there was a lot of water. But Jiang Hai still dug 20 meters deep. Although there was some moisture in the water was very cold. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was bone-chilling. The underground water couldn't be exposed to the sun all year round, so the water was very cold. Even Jiang Hai couldn't help but shiver after touching it for a long time. The water had to flow in the river for a while before the fish could be put in. Otherwise they would freeze to death. According to the location, they dug 5 wells in a row, and all of them had water. According to the estimation, the total flow of water in these 5 wells was about 430 tons. This had already fulfilled Jiang Hai's initial requirement for the river. First, they used cement to seal the mouth of the well. After preparing everything, Charles left with his team. In the afternoon, along with a rumbling sound, a trenching machine appeared. The rumbling sound scared the cows in the manor a lot. But fortunately, Jiang Hai's cows had big hearts. Their bodies were strong, so they weren't scared. At first, they were a little panicked, but later, they became obedient. This also made Robbins and the others relieved. If the cows didn't perform well, then they would have to drive them back to the cowshed. There were only so many cowboys, so if the cows were to riot, they wouldn't be able to catch them. According to the location, the digging machines began to operate. 1.5 meters deep wasn't too deep, so it didn't take long for them to dig it. Jiang Hai didn't throw away the soil that was dug out. He still needed it to build the riverbank in the future. Moreover, even if he didn't need it, he could throw it in the pasture. Jiang Hai's soil could be said to be the best soil in the world. This muddy water was stained with Jiang Hai's blood, so it wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was the best in the world. This kind of treasure, how could he throw it away? So he let Hurt pile the soil on the other side. Under Hurt's command, the workers here were working hard to dig the river. On the other side, there was a group of people who had already started to build the hot spring. They first buried some pipes in the ground. These pipes were all water pipes. Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person who would eat everything alone. Anyway, his hot spring water was endless. Instead of using it for himself, he might as well let everyone use it. But if there were a bunch of men bathing naked in the hot spring in front of his house, he wouldn't feel comfortable. So instead of this, it was better to directly send the pipes to their houses. Robbins and the others were quite happy about this. After all, it wasn't popular for Europeans and Americans to bathe in bathhouses. Being able to have a separate pipe in the house was excellent for them. So, including Jiang Hai's manor, all the villas had a pipe. When the pipe was finished, it was already 2 days later. Then they started to expand the hot spring. Just like the one Jiang Hai requested, the main body was naturally reinforced concrete. Hurt didn't know where he got a pile of bamboo from, but he made a circle around the concrete wall. There was no concrete inside at all. The wall was meters high, and there was a layer of barbed wire on top of it. This was to prevent wild animals from entering. Inside the hot spring, Charles Hurt specially built a roof with bamboo. At the same time, he used cement and bamboo to separate the hot spring into a men's and women's baths. Of course, there was a place to change clothes outside the bathroom. Jiang Hai was very happy to see it, because it was really beautiful. At first, Charles wanted to make this place indoor, but Jiang Hai didn't agree. Making it indoor would be no different from taking a bath in a hot spring at home. It would be more interesting if it was close to nature. Zhao Hai didn't think much about it. After everything was built, Charles Hurt and the others started to dig the ground. After making the baths look like a bathing area, they brought in some stones and piled them up. After everything was ready, they started to dig the 4 hot springs. When the hot spring water gushed out, they had to use a pump to pump the water away. When there was only clear water left, they had to seal the mouth of the hot spring. After cleaning the baths, they had to put in clean water. Only then, the hot spring was finished. From discovering the hot spring to finishing construction, it took a whole week. Of course, most of the time was because Hurt spent most of his manpower on building the commercial street and Zhonghai's river. After all, for Zhonghai, although the hot spring was good, it was only a small path. The most important thing was the river. Digging the river was very fast, and the trenching machines could dig 1 kilometer in a day. After all, it was not deep. With several trenching machines working together, the speed was still very fast. Coupled with the soft soil on Zhonghai's side, it was really not difficult to dig 1.5 meters. In 7 days, the river had been completely dug through. Now, only the estuary and the estuary had not been dug. Reinforcing the embankment and the like was much more difficult than digging the river. According to Charles Hurt, it would take another week for the river to be completed. Zhonghai could also wait. Yesterday, he had made a phone call to China. His batch of fish, saplings, and other things had just set sail. It should take about a month for them to reach him. That's why he still has plenty of time. But even though the river was not in a hurry, it didn't mean that Zhonghai's hot spring was not in a hurry. On the first day after the hot spring was completed, Zhonghai did not try it. The next day, he couldn't wait any longer. After dinner, he took his clothes and went to the hot spring. Because it was separate for men and women, Zhonghai didn't need to wear anything. He directly walked into the hot spring with his butt naked. When he walked inside, Zhonghai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This feeling was really comfortable. When he was in Bing City, he also liked to take a bath in the bathhouse. The feeling of soaking in such a big pool was the same as soaking in a bathtub at home. The water temperature of the hot spring is constant. After all of it was dug out, the temperature has been fixed at 43 degrees Celsius. It will be a little hot at first, but it is very comfortable to soak in it. Leaning on the big stone and looking at the moon that has risen in the distance, Zhonghai can't help but let out a sigh of relief. It is very comfortable. At this time, if there is a TV, it would be even better. He is already considering whether to install a TV here. It must be very comfortable to soak in it while watching TV. Just as Zhonghai was enjoying his bath, he suddenly heard the sound of water. Looking back, he found that there was no one else around him. If he didn't enter the men's bath, then he must have entered the women's bath. Chapter 459. Hearing the sound of water coming from the next door, Zhonghai couldn't help but look at the opposite side vigilantly. He didn't know what was going on the opposite side, but although he couldn't see anything, it didn't prevent him from asking loudly, "Who is it?" Hearing Zhonghai's words, the person on the other side couldn't help but be taken aback. Then a voice slowly came out, "It's me." Hearing this voice, Zhonghai was relieved, but at the same time, he couldn't help but be a little puzzled, because the owner of this voice was no stranger to Zhonghai. It was Bernice, but why did she come here in the dark? "You're really interesting. Didn't you tell us that if we want to soak in this hot spring, we have to bask in it for a few more days? Why did you come here to enjoy yourself tonight?" Maybe she knew that it was Zhonghai on the opposite side. Bernice didn't care. She leaned against the wall over there, washing her body while asking Zhonghai, It really should be basked in it for a few more days, but I'm also thinking about your safety, so I came in to try it first." Hearing Bernice's words, Zhonghai couldn't help but be speechless. He couldn't say that he wanted to enjoy himself first, right? In fact, such a hot spring really should be basked in it for a few more days. After all, it had been underground before, and it was hard to say what bacteria there were underground. And most importantly, the house behind was newly built. It was inevitable for a newly built house to be dried for a while. Even if the materials used were good, it would still take a few days. But Zhonghai seemed to be a little too anxious. "Tisk, I'll be a fool if I believe you." Hearing Zhonghai's words, Bernice couldn't help but chuckle, then said. Hearing her words, Zhonghai couldn't help but touch his nose a little awkwardly. Now he just wanted to change the topic. However, after thinking about it for a while, He suddenly remembered that although the two pools were separated, the water was actually one. The 4 hot springs were underground, and the top was made of cement. If he were to look at the floor plan now, the 4 hot springs were like 4 buckets. They were just above the pool, and water was pouring out. And on the wall, it was just separated in the middle, and the water on both sides was actually mixed together. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but move. Could this be considered the legendary mixed bath? Thinking of this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but become a little shameful. Looking at the existence emerging from the water surface, Zhang Hai's lover, right, couldn't help but stick to it. At the same time, Zhang Hai's mind began to fantasize about Bernice's appearance next door. For a while, there was nothing to talk about. Zhang Hai, thank you. But before he could move, Bernice T. Ugh, it's okay, but what are you thanking me for? As soon as he heard Bernice's words, Zhang Hai seemed to have been caught red-handed. He immediately sobered up, let go of his hand, and subconsciously agreed. But halfway through, he asked with some doubts. Why is she thanking me for nothing? You're not doing something strange, are you? However, Zhang Hai's unstable voice seemed to have betrayed him. Bernice couldn't help but ask curiously after being stunned for a while. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was even more embarrassed. No nonsense, am I that kind of person? Cough, you haven't said what you are thanking me for. As soon as he heard Bernice's words, Zhang Hai's face turned red all of a sudden, but this was not the time to admit it, so he could only bite the bullet and say, it shouldn't be, after all, you don't lack women. I'm talking about little Ya's matter. Hearing Zhang Hai's detailed explanation, Bernice also turned her head, looked at the bright moonlight in the sky, and said with a serious face, that's not a problem. As soon as he heard that it was about little Ya, Zhang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile. It had been almost 10 days since Zhang Hai returned from the country. In these 10 days, although it was impossible for him to directly use spiritual energy to cure Xiao Ya, it would be too eye-catching. But these days, he had already begun to treat Xiao Ya. Every day, he would separate a trace of spiritual energy and enter Xiao Ya's body to make her body better. There was no need to doubt the effect of aura, but what surprised Zhang Hai was that in these 10 days, little Ya's body had become quite good. Although she still looked weak, her physical fitness had improved quite significantly. Bernice was the clearest about this improvement, because in the past, little Ya's body couldn't be exposed to the sun, and no matter how much calcium she ate, she would still lack calcium. This was inevitable, so little Ya's body was very weak, there were almost no muscles on her body, and the development of her bones was not very good. But after 10 days, little Ya's body not only became taller, but also faintly showed muscle lines, which made Bernice very surprised. Her spirit was better, and her body was more robust. Even now when she was cooking at night, she could hold a spoon with one hand, and her strength was at least twice as strong as before. But what made Zhang Hai most depressed was that, although her physical fitness was getting better and better, her hair and skin didn't have the slightest intention of changing back. It was still snow-white, which made Zhang Hai a little confused. He knew that this wasn't because the amount of aura output wasn't large enough. Aura was aura. It entered bit by bit, repairing defects that shouldn't exist in the human body. It was also repairing. However, it wasn't much different from the entry of the entire aura. Now he couldn't cure it at all, and Zhang Hai couldn't cure it at all. He couldn't help but feel a little depressed. He thought that he might not be able to cure little Ya, so these days, he really felt a little guilty. So he looked for little Ya to play every day. He accompanied her to watch TV, play games, and talk about recipes. At the same time, he also told her about the ingredients he imported from the country. This made little Ya very excited. For so many years, no one had accompanied her like this. When she was young, because of her illness, the children weren't willing to play with her. The adults in the children's families were also very disgusted with her. She didn't even go to school. When she was 7 years old, she didn't even know how to read. Later, the family's conditions were better, so they hired a tutor to teach her from the beginning. However, the people in the family were also very busy, so no one played with her. She was very sensible. Later, she found that learning cooking was very good, so she began to take the initiative to learn cooking skills. It could also be considered a kind of pastime. Until today, little Ya found for the first time that someone played with her was really a very happy thing. Zhang Hai really had nothing to do every day. For the past 10 days, he basically played with Little Ye every day. The relationship between the two of them was rapidly warming up, and Little Ye was also becoming more and more cheerful. Now, she even took the initiative to joke with Zhang Hai. And because of Zhang Hai, Delina and Marian also liked to play with her. Looking at her sister's happy appearance and her body that was getting better, although Bernice didn't say it, she was really grateful to Zhang Hai in her heart. Today, she saw Zhang Hai come out and followed him out. As a result, she found that Zhang Hai had sneaked into the hot spring. When she thought of the hot spring, she was also a little excited, so she went into the women's bathroom and talked to Zhang Hai. Whether this is a problem for you or not, in my opinion, Little Ye is my only family in this world, so I still want to thank you. Listening to Zhang Hai's words, Bernice chuckled, and then said very seriously, "Hey, don't always say thank you. Action, action." Listening to Bernice's words of gratitude, Zhang Hai also smiled and joked. He was not short of money, fame, and women. These words were just a joke. "Okay, what do you want me to do? How about giving yourself to me? Come here now." Hearing what Zhang Hai said, Bernice also laughed, and then said heartily. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai, who was about to soften, straightened up again. "Ahem, what nonsense are you talking about? I'm talking about action. If you really want to thank me, then help me do something. Clean up the room or something." Looking at Bernice's words, Zhang Hai was really scared and said with an embarrassed face, "TCH, then give yourself to me. Okay, I'm done soaking. When you figure it out, come to my room." "It's not like you don't have the key to my room." When Bernice heard what Zhang Hai said, she couldn't help but snort, then said with a smile. As Bernice's voice got farther and farther, Zhang Hai listened to her words and couldn't help but feel a little depressed. But just as Zhang Hai was about to silently send Bernice away, suddenly there was a loud noise from the other side. "Ouch! Bang pa!" With Bernice's scream, the sound of a heavy object falling and the sound of water sounded. Zhang Hai was also shocked, and instantly thought that Bernice might have fallen over there. Zhang Hai immediately stood up and rushed to the shore in 2 steps. It was a bit difficult for the 3-meter-high wall to stop Zhang Hai. After taking 2 steps back, Zhang Hai's hand was already hanging on the wall in the middle. Then he used his arms to turn over. With this turnover, under the moonlight, he happened to see Bernice's whole body curled up in the water, and even her head didn't come out. Seeing this scene, Zhang Hai was also shocked. He turned over and entered the women's bathroom. He quickly ran to Bernice and pulled her out directly with both hands. But with this pull, Bernice's eyes also opened. She and Zhang Hai looked at each other, and the two were stunned in an instant. Bernice did fall just now, and her leg was hit by a stone next to her. At that time, because her leg was very painful, she buried her head in the water and rubbed her leg. She was going to wait for her leg to get better before going ashore. But she didn't expect that after Zhang Hai heard the sound, he turned over directly. Before she could stand up, he had already pulled her out of the water. Originally, one needed to wear a swimsuit to soak in the hot spring, but after all, the hot spring in Zhang Hai's place had just been set up, and there were not many people, so Zhang Hai and Bernice were naked at this time. Although it was dark, the moon tonight was particularly big. The two looked at each other like this, and they were in a deadlock here. No one knew what to say. Chapter 460. Do I look good? After about 3 awkward minutes, Bernice's voice came out first. Although she was smiling, Zhang Hai felt that her words were trembling. He did not know if it was because of shyness or anger. Looking at Bernice's pretty face, Zhang Hai knew that it was not right to answer whether it was good or not. This plot was too melodramatic. Zhang Hai had never been so melodramatic in his life. It made it seem like he did it on purpose. Indeed, no matter what, he took advantage of this matter, but this question was really not easy to answer. Fortunately, Zhang Hai's brain was not slow. He thought for a moment and said, I didn't see anything. A ruthless fire burned my home and took away my light. You are my eyes, showing me the changes of the 4 seasons. Thank you." She watched Zhang Hai slowly climb onto the shore with his bare buttocks. Then, he sang as he walked to the men's bathroom. Bernice, who was still a little confused, suddenly smiled. This Zhang Hai is really shameless. It was not until Zhang Hai's figure disappeared that Bernice remembered that her leg still hurt. She slowly climbed onto the shore of the bathtub. After rubbing it again, she took a towel to the locker room. When she came out after changing, she found that Zhang Hai had already left. This made her breathe a sigh of relief, but at the same time, she was also a little disappointed. This Zhang Hai was really dull. He had seen her naked, but he didn't know to wait for her. Didn't he know that she had hurt her leg? However, although she thought so in her heart, she could not ask others to help, so she limped back to the room. Lying on the bed, Bernice looked at her bruised leg and could not help but be speechless. At the same time, the scene just now unconsciously appeared in her mind. Although it was dark now, there were lights in the hot spring, and the moon was still very bright tonight. She was very sure that when she and Zhang Hai looked at each other, she saw Zhang Hai naked, and Zhang Hai saw her naked as well. Zhang Hai's strong body, streamlined waist, and something that was straight. Just thinking about it made Bernice's face turn red. When she was young and ignorant, she also secretly watched some Japanese and European romantic action idol dramas. In those movies, she was very sure that Asians were not as muscular as Europeans and Americans. However, when she saw Zhang Hai's today, she couldn't help but feel a little emotional. She didn't expect it to be so big. It was much bigger than the black men in the movies. At first glance, it looked very fierce. Ba, what nonsense are you thinking about? That thing isn't mine. Let's go to sleep. Suddenly, Bernice was stunned. What was she thinking about? She patted the blanket and cursed. Then, she turned her head and forced herself to sleep. But whether she could sleep or not, she wasn't sure. After Zhang Hai went back, he indeed recalled Bernice's figure. To be honest, because Bernice had not been nourished by Zhang Hai's spiritual energy, her figure was not particularly good. At least, it was not as good as Delina, Marian, and Aphrodite. Of course, it was not as good as Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen's. But that white and tender appearance. Sigh, as an experienced driver, Zhang Hai couldn't help but turn on the computer. Then, he drove Xiao Bai and little Huang out of his room. His sinful little hands slowly clicked on a hidden folder. The next morning, after Zhang Hai woke up, he washed up as usual, then went for a run and came back for breakfast. But today, on the lawn outside the villa, there was no shadow of Bernice practicing martial arts. When she came down for breakfast in the morning, Delina and Marian, who had just woken up, were a little confused. On the other hand, Azalina looked at her and Zhang Hai with some ridicule. It seemed that something had happened between the two last night. Feeling Azalina's gaze, Zhang Hai did not react. After all, he did not do anything last night. But Bernice was different. Feeling Azalina's gaze, her face suddenly turned red, but she could not say this directly. She could only glare at Zhang Hai hatefully and continue eating breakfast. The atmosphere during breakfast was a little strange. But after breakfast, Zhang Hai went to Xiao Ya's room again. While treating her, he also played with her. In the afternoon, he went to the cowshed to brush his little Xia's hair. He took it out for a walk, fed it some carrots, and went to the dock for a walk. When he came back, it was already time for dinner. Xiaoya had already prepared dinner. After eating a delicious meal, everyone could go to the hot spring to enjoy tonight. They took a beautiful bath together. Of course, they took separate baths. Then, everyone returned to the villa. Those who wanted to play, those who wanted to watch TV, those who wanted to play on the computer, those who wanted to sleep went to sleep. This was Zhang Hai's day. It was really boring, but Zhang Hai was really happy. He ate well, drank well, played well, and lived well here. What was there to be unhappy about? And Xiaoya was also very happy. She was getting happier and happier. Sometimes, a regular life would pass very quickly. Especially when there was nothing to do, happy time would pass very quickly. Just like working from Monday to Friday, it felt very slow. But when it came to Saturday and Sunday, it felt like there was not enough time. Before he did anything, 48 hours had already passed. He had to go to work again on Monday, and it was the same when he went to school. Why was it so hard to have a class of 40 minutes? And when it came to winter and summer vacation, more than a month would pass. The most terrible thing was to shake. Children grew up in a flash. Middle-aged people retired in a flash. Old people shook. Old people can't stand shaking anymore. Zhang Hai was now living a very happy life here. He had a peaceful attitude towards life, and he didn't have any ambitions. He was living a very happy life in this grassland. He also felt that time passed very quickly. After about 10 days, the river channel was completed. Zhang Hai's river channel was handed over to Hurt Charles, and it was very reliable. The entire river channel was 4 meters wide. The widest part was 4.5 meters, and the narrowest part was 3.5 meters. The depth of the river was 1.6 meters. Because there was still 10 centimeters of sand, the sand was all from Zhang Hai's beach. Some of it was from the sea while some of it was from the beach. Zhang Hai's beach was very rich in sand. After all, there was a group of parrotfish raised by Zhang Hai. These parrotfish were specialized in producing sand. They only needed to pave the river channel, and they didn't sell it. Naturally, there was no problem. The two sides of the river were made of concrete, and they were about 30 centimeters higher than the other side of the river. On the river channel, there was a small bridge every 300 meters. They were all made of wood, but the inside was also made of reinforced concrete. According to Hurt Charles, these small bridges couldn't be destroyed even if there was a real flood. On the two sides of the river channel, there was a man-made track. It was like a 400-meter track in a normal university. It was made of rubber, but it felt good to walk on. It was good for running, but it was a bit hard to take care of. But Zhang Hai didn't want to throw garbage here, so it didn't matter. The road was about 2 meters wide. Every 10 meters, there was a street lamp. Under the street lamp, there was a trash can and benches. Looking at this design, Zhang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Hurt Charles really wanted to make his place into a park. But it didn't matter. Anyway, Zhang Hai didn't need to pay extra. These were all gifts from Hurt Charles. On the other side of the path, there were rows of trees. They weren't valuable trees. Most of the trees in North America were red maples. Because the wood here wasn't valuable, at least not as valuable as in China, these trees were directly dug out from the Alabama mountains. It didn't cost too much. However, it brought a new screen and scenery to Zhang Hai's pasture. After all these things were done, Charles began to dig out the spring that had accumulated for a long time. The water from the 5 springs gushed out together, forming a torrent in an instant. Just as Zhang Hai was wondering if these guys would rush out of the river bank, Charles Hart's ability was also revealed. This stream of water actually followed the river's shape and flowed into the sea. After half an hour, the river gradually calmed down. Under the sunlight, the surface of the river was sparkling, and it was really beautiful. The next thing to do was to bask in the sun. The river water that had just emerged was still very cold. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was bone-chilling. When the temperature of the water reaches about 20 degrees Celsius, Zhang Hai will plant some water plants in it. Of course, the seeds of the water plants will be nourished by his aura. Once they are thrown into the river and take root, they will be the best food for the fish that will be introduced later. Although it was Zhang Hai's first time planting plants in the river, he had done it in the sea before. After 5 days of basking in the sun, Zhang Hai began to plant the water plants. The water plants quickly took root and grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the sand at the bottom of the river was stabilized. At the same time, the whole river was filled with vitality. With the aura and water plants in the river, many marine creatures were attracted to the river. Of course, most marine animals could not enter the river. However, some small shrimp, crabs, and the migratory salmon that Zhang Hai raised were quite interested in the river. At least when they matured, they would have a place to lay their eggs. Just like this, after another half a month, when everything was ready to continue, Zhang Hai received a call. The ship from China had arrived, and at the same time, Wang Yang's jade had arrived. His jade did not need to be as troublesome as the other species. He directly took a plane to Los Angeles, and then flew directly from Los Angeles to Boston. After receiving these 2 calls, Zhang Hai began to get busy. First, he asked Edouard Anderson to prepare the ship from China. At the same time, he asked Luo Binci and the rest to help take in the animals. Zhang Hai also called people who specialized in renovation. Everything was ready. Chapter 461. Hey Boss Zhang, here. At the airport outside B City, Zhang Hai had just parked his car when he heard the voice of Wang Yang, Fatty Wang. Following the voice, he saw Fatty Wang standing in front of a large pile of materials wrapped in black cloth, waving his hand at Zhang Hai. Seeing him, Zhang Hai and others also drove over. "Hey, you've been waiting for a long time." After getting out of his Rolls-Royce, Zhang Hai said to Wang Yang with a smile. "No, these things have just been made. Wow, Rolls-Royce, this car is not cheap." Looking at the car parked by Zhang Hai, Wang Yang couldn't help but smile and say, "Men love cars very much, this is inevitable." But to be honest, it is the first time Wang Yang has seen someone like Zhang Hai, who bought a Rolls-Royce and drove it himself. "Are all the materials here?" After a few polite words with Wang Yang, Zhang Hai looked at the stone materials behind Wang Yang. Of course, there are a total of 267 kilograms of these materials, worth 400 million renminbi. "I will bring them all here first. You can give me as much money as you can use. I will bring the rest back to China and I can sell it again." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Fatty Wang also said with a smile, "No need to bring them back, I want them all. It's only 400 million renminbi. Zhang Hai doesn't lack money. Moreover, if the quality of this jade is really good, he can use it to make things in the future. Whether it's to carry it with him or to give it to others, it's a good thing. You're really rich and overbearing." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Wang Yang couldn't help but say with emotion, "This Zhang Hai is really not an ordinary person, but if he can sell them all here, it will be a good thing for him." In the past month, he has run to Xueqi province, Qing province, Russia, Korea. From those places, with his own shameless courage and some previous relationships, he received 267 kilograms of jade materials. If Zhang Hai buys all these jade materials, he can earn almost 100 million renminbi. For him, this is not a good thing. "Let's go." Looking at Fatty Wang, Zhang Hai waved his hand and directly motioned Luo Binci to start the assembly. Although these jade materials are very valuable, they are not too much. 267 kilograms, that is, more than 500 jin. Fatty Wang neatly divided these jade materials into 5 pieces, each of which is 50 kilograms. Even before Luo Binci came to Zhang Hai, it was not a problem for them to carry 50 kilograms each. Now that they have eaten spiritual energy beef and spiritual energy fish, 50 kilograms? Is that still a problem? However, they also know that these things are very valuable, so they deliberately took care of them and put them in a specially driven F750 car. They wrapped it with a few layers of plastic wrap, a layer of foam board, and a cardboard box. Zhang Hai is quite concerned about these things. After putting the 6 pieces in the car, Zhang Hai let Wang Yang get in his car. Luo Binci came to Harriman Fells together with Andrew Christian in the F750. Everyone returned to Zhang Hai's manor. This is not the first time Wang Yang came to the United States. He bought a lot of tourmaline here. Therefore, he was quite familiar with the United States and the American countryside. However, after arriving at Zhang Hai's manor, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. This was because the place looked quite beautiful, quite good. Wow, I really didn't expect Boss Zhang's manor to be so big. It's much bigger than I imagined. A person who can casually take out 400 million yuan to buy jade is obviously not an ordinary person. Even if Zhang Hai is a cattle farmer, it is reasonable for him to have such a scale. Walking in, he can't help but say with some emotion, "It's okay. Let's go in first." Hearing Fatty Wang's words, Zhang Hai also chuckled. He doesn't care about these compliments because he knows that his manor can't be judged by what it looks like on the surface. The things in his manor, whether it is beef or fish, are the best, and this is hard to change if you don't try it yourself. After all, Fatty Wang is a businessman. He will only stay at Zhang Hai's place for a day. After confirming that Zhang Hai has enough jade materials and receiving the balance, he will leave. So Zhang Hai doesn't care about him coming to taste the delicacies of his manor. When the car came back, the girls in Zhang Hai's villa, who were playing in the manor, naturally noticed them. After Zhang Hai got off the car, Wang Yang couldn't help but sigh with more emotion. At this time, in his sight, Zhang Hai's manor is really beautiful. There is a huge main villa and a series of small villas behind, an artificial river flowing in front of Zhang Hai's door, a grassland in the distance, and a further sea. At a glance, it really makes people feel small. The sweet air and the beautiful girls in front of him. To be honest, if this is his home, he will not change it no matter how much money he is given, and this is the case that he hasn't eaten the food in Zhang Hai's manor. Hello. Seeing Fatty Wong get off the car, Daliana and others here take the initiative to greet him. Hello. Fatty Wong is very familiar with Daliana, Marian, and Azalina. After all, he has seen them twice. However, it's his first time to see Bernice. Although she looks familiar, he really doesn't know her. After smiling at her, Fatty Wong was taken into the villa by Zhang Hai. In the villa, the most famous carpenter in Winthrop Town has been waiting here for a long time. Seeing Zhang Hai's group come back with jade materials, the 50-odd carpenter also smiled. After that, he went upstairs and entered Zhang Hai's room. After checking these jade materials, the old carpenter also told Zhang Hai what to do. Directly using these jade stones to make a bed and floor was definitely not enough. The floor couldn't be that thin. Moreover, these jade stones weren't too hard. If they were used as a floor, it would be very easy for it to break. Therefore, according to his opinion, the surface of the floor could be made of jade, and the bottom of the floor could be made of cork. In this way, the jade materials wouldn't be broken. As for the bed, Zhang Hai wanted to make it 4 meters by 2 meters. He liked big beds. Of course, such a big bed should be made of 4 waists. The bottom of the bed should be made of wood. Jade materials could be used to make the bed surface, bedside table, and the outer layer. At the same time, because the bed was too heavy, if it was pressed on the jade, it would be easy to break it. Therefore, the space under the bed should be made of wood. Zhang Hai didn't consider this when he bought these jade materials. But now that the old carpenter said it, Zhang Hai didn't have to refute. After all, there were specializations in this field. Zhang Hai followed the instructions of the old carpenter. After everything was settled, according to the old carpenter, it would take about a month. Zhang Hai wasn't in a hurry. He could use as much time as he wanted after signing the contract. Zhang Hai let Wang Yang stay in his house for the night. Naturally, when they were eating dinner, Wang Yang almost swallowed his tongue. The dinner was made by Xiao Ya. This was something that both Xiao Ya and Zhang Hai tacitly agreed on. Xiao Ya was different from Bernice. She was still willing to do some housework and help out. This was because she could feel that she wasn't a waste. As for Bernice, if you asked her to do something, it would be difficult. According to her, if Zhang Hai felt that he had lost out, then he would give her his body to repay her. Asking her to do housework, that was impossible. Zhang Hai had top-notch ingredients. Coupled with Xiao Ya's top-notch cooking skills, the taste of these dishes was really good. My God, Zhang Hai, I have to admit that your place is heaven. The environment is so good, and the food is so good. To be honest, I am a little tempted to go back and move my family here. Eating the delicious food in front of him until he couldn't eat anymore, Fatty Wong touched his stomach and said. After listening to his words, Zhang Hai also chuckled. His life can't be replicated. After all, Fatty Wong helped him go to so many places. Therefore, Zhang Hai was very attentive to tonight's dinner. In addition to the top-notch beef, he also specially got a lobster, abalone, sea cucumber. Xiaoya also put in a lot of effort to cook this table of food. Her culinary skills were no worse than the chefs of 5-star hotels. In addition, the ingredients were too good. After Fatty Wong took the first bite, he couldn't stop. Looking at his figure, it was obvious that this guy was a foodie. It would be strange if he didn't eat until he was full after eating such delicious food. Ah, delicious food, beautiful scenery, beautiful women, I really envy you. Looking at Zhang Hai's smile, Fatty Wong sighed. It could only be said that different people had different lives. After listening to his words, Zhang Hai also smiled. Others couldn't learn his life. That night, Zhang Hai accompanied Fatty Wong to have a good meal. After drinking a lot of beer, the two of them went back to their rooms to sleep. The next morning, Fatty Wong left. He had to go back to China to settle the bill. As for the money for the jade, after Zhang Hai checked the goods yesterday and confirmed that there was no problem, he had already transferred the balance to him. Zhang Hai wasn't the kind of person to drag other people's money. He left Zhang Hai's manor reluctantly, but the situation in Zhang Hai's manor had planted a seed in his heart. This made him think about Zhang Hai's manor after he went back. So after Winthrop was allowed to travel, he signed up for the first batch of people who came to visit. He had been to many villages in the United States, but Zhang Hai's manor was the first and only one that he couldn't forget. After Fatty Wong left, Zhang Hai wasn't as sad as when his other friends left. After all, Fatty Wong wasn't his friend. At most the two of them had dealings in business. Moreover, after he left, Zhang Hai was busy with the second thing. That was the ship from China. It had arrived in New York and was heading to Winthrop. This time, there were a lot of things on the ship. In addition to the things he picked from the land and wanted to eat, there were a lot of valuable toys. Whether it was the Yangtze River grenadier fish, yellow croaker fish, or even Chinese bahaba fish, these were all treasures. Chapter 462. Woo! With a burst of thick smoke and the sun rising, a large ocean liner in the distance was slowly approaching Zhang Hai's port. As it got closer and closer, the liner also became bigger and clearer. Zhang Hai's dock was originally a deep-water gravity dock. At first, it was not known whether the original owner wanted to dock such a liner or just wanted to show off his wealth. The rich people in the United States did not know what low-key was. But now it saved Zhang Hai a lot of trouble. If it were not for this gravity dock, these large liners would not be able to come over at all. They might have to dock in Boston, and then Zhang Hai would have to fetch them himself. In that case it would be troublesome, but it was okay now. They could dock directly at his dock, which saved a lot of trouble. As the ship docked under Ed Anderson's signal, the ship gradually leaned against the dock. Obviously, the other party did not expect Zhang Hai's dock to be so big. It may not be as big as Boston's, but it was not worse than an ordinary dock. The other party was very relieved to stop here. As the big ship docked at the dock, a group of people walked down from the ship. "Hello, may I ask who is Zhang Hai, Mr. Zhang?" The leader was a man who looked to be about 30 years old. He was a gentleman with a height of about 1.75 meters. He was fair and clean. He wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and looked like a refined scum. After getting off the boat, he looked around and said to Zhang Hai and the others who were walking towards him, "I am." Although he did not have a good impression of the other party, Zhang Hai still walked over. These were all his things. "Hello, Mr. Zhang. My name is Sun Chong. Sun Yuan is my father. This time, my father had something to do and could not deliver the things to you in person, so I came to deliver them." Seeing Zhang Hai come out, the man named Sun Chong was obviously a little surprised. Although he heard that Zhang Hai was young when he came, he did not expect Zhang Hai to be so young. It really surprised him. This person who seems to be about the same age as him has a net worth of hundreds of millions, and he is also in contact with the senior officials of the imperial court. Is he the legendary third generation or something? Oh, hello. Zhang Hai did not have the leisure to think about what he was thinking, but the third generation? He can't be famous, not even for a generation, because he is not a party member at all. How can he be famous? Here is the list of your goods. After shaking hands with Zhang Hai, Sun Chong handed the list that had been in his hand. Zhang Hai also took the list and looked at it. Indeed, it was all the things he had bought. He handed the list to Ai Dehua, who would be responsible for unloading these things. This list was written in Chinese and English, so he was not afraid that Ai Dehua would not be able to understand it. In addition to the things you bought at the production and sales meeting, there are 3 million large yellow croaker fry, 200,000 Yangtze River grenadier fry, and 8. It was requested to be handed to you by the higher-ups. We have been taking care of these fry very carefully on the way, so the damage should not be particularly big. Seeing that Zhang Hai's people had gone to deliver the goods, Sun Chong also walked to Zhang Hai's side and said seriously. Along the way, he also knew that the value of his ship's goods was not cheap. "I've really troubled you." Hearing Sun Chang's words, Zhang Hai was also stunned. He didn't expect these people to really take him seriously. He originally thought that it would be good if these guys could bring the things he wanted. After all, this was the deal between the imperial court and himself, but he didn't expect these people to really care about it. In fact, it was understandable. Not everyone in the country wanted to poach the imperial court, especially those who wanted to climb up. Zhang Hai had a relationship with the higher-ups. Although they didn't know what the relationship was, as long as it was a relationship, they couldn't afford to offend him. No matter what industry, it was not easy to support you, but it was easy to destroy you. If Zhang Hai was dissatisfied with this escort, if Zhang Hai really had a relationship with the higher-ups, Zhang Hai's words might ruin the Sun family's political career. Therefore, Sun Chong had to be careful because he couldn't afford to gamble, and this was what he should do. Walking into the big boat next to Sun Chong, Zhang Hai also saw a variety of animals. The most eye-catching ones were the 3 huge aquariums. One of them was closed, which was the aquarium of the Yangtze River swordfish. The other 2 aquariums were filled with running water. That was to say, when the boat was sailing, the water in the aquariums would be constantly changed while the boat was sailing. In these 2 aquariums, there were the larvae of the large yellow croaker and 8 Chinese bahaba fish. The 8 Chinese bahaba fish that Minister Qin found for Zhang Hai weren't very big. They were about 5 catties. In the slightly turbid water, they kept swimming. They looked a little listless, which was understandable. As long as these fish reached Zhang Hai's territory alive, everything would be fine. After taking a look at these things, Zhang Hai also asked everyone to help move them. The first to be moved were naturally the animals, chickens, donkeys, pigs, and sheep. The quantity of these animals wasn't very large, and there weren't many of them. The most important thing was that Zhang Hai had already built the enclosures for these animals by the river. This time, Zhang Hai also moved all the animals' enclosures to the river. The enclosures for the same type of animals were very large, such as the original wyverns and chickens. Their nests were not only bigger than the previous ones, but a tributary flowed through the enclosure. It would be much easier to clean up in the future. At the same time, some trees and turf were specially placed. Birds like to stand on high places, but in order to prevent them from flying away, Zhang Hai deliberately made a large net like a bird zoo. But this time, he made it higher, so that a tall person like Zhang Hai wouldn't be able to get in. Zhang Hai didn't want to feel uncomfortable. The same sheep enclosure, the enclosure for the 2 types of chickens, the enclosure for the Zhang pigs, the enclosure for the German donkeys, and the enclosure for the Mazimukan sheep were all ready. Ai Dehua and the others only needed to move these guys over. This was because Zhang Hai believed that as long as these guys ate Zhang Hai's grass, it would definitely not be a problem for them to survive. The other part was the plants Zhang Hai bought, the stalks of saffron tea, the seeds of sand nest radish, and the rice of Dao Huaxiang. Especially the rice. Since returning to China this time, Zhang Hai didn't think that he would miss rice so much. This time, he bought a lot of it back, but Ai Dehua and the others actually didn't care much about these things, because they didn't eat rice. After moving all these things away, it was time to deal with the 3 tanks of fish. But before putting the fish in, Zhang Hai deliberately quietly walked to the top of the fish tank, stretched his hand out of the water, and released a trace of spiritual energy. The first to release spiritual energy was the fish tank of the Chinese bahaba fish. The fish here were all wild. They were quite sensitive to spiritual energy. The moment they felt it, they rushed over and swam around Zhang Hai's hand. Looking at these 8 fish, Zhang Hai knew that these were the treasures that would make him rich in the future. So Zhang Hai didn't stingy this time. 8 fish, half a piece of spiritual energy each. Then he couldn't help but sweat a little, but this was all allowed. After absorbing Zhang Hai's spiritual energy, the 8 Chinese bahaba fish instantly became energetic, and didn't give others a chance to notice their difference. Zhang Hai had already asked these people to open the exit and let the 8 fish into the sea. Once the 8 fish entered the sea, it was obvious that Big Fool and the dolphins would definitely recognize them. As long as they were protected by Big Fool and the dolphins, it wouldn't be easy for anything to happen to these fish. After arranging the 8 fish, Zhang Hai also went to the large yellow croakers and the Yangtze swordfish. However, these 2 fish didn't receive the same treatment as the Chinese bahaba fish. Although there were 3 million yellow croakers in total, Zhang Hai only put 3 pieces of spiritual energy in them. This amount of spiritual energy was enough to let the young yellow croakers grow healthily. Growing too fast might not be a good thing. The Yangtze swordfish also had 3 pieces of spiritual energy. But 3 pieces of spiritual energy was naturally different from 3 million. After the large yellow croakers were put into the sea, these fish quickly scattered. Some went to live in the distant coral area, and some went to the fishing and grazing area. According to Zhang Hai's estimation, the young yellow croakers had a higher chance of surviving in the coral area, but at least 1/3 of them would die in the fishing and grazing area. After all, there were already a lot of red croakers there. However, Zhang Hai didn't feel bad about this. Survival of the fittest was the law of nature. It was also the only way to turn these domesticated fish into wild fish. Finally, Zhang Hai didn't put the Yangtze swordfish directly into the sea. Right now, these young fish still needed to be put into the river. Therefore, he specially used a trailer to drag the young fish out and put them into the river. This time, Sun Chong and the others really took good care of them. 200,000 fish seedlings. After such a long time of tossing and turning, only a few thousand of them died. Unexpectedly, there were still more than 190,000 fish seedlings that survived. For Zhang Hai, this was an unexpected surprise. As for whether or not they would be eaten by the salmon and crabs in the river, it had nothing to do with Zhang Hai. As for the eel that Zhang Hai had been thinking about, he didn't put it in the river, because if he put it in the river, he wouldn't be able to catch it. He listened to Little Ya's words and prepared to plant rice in the rice field next year, so that it would be easy to catch and raise. When all the animals were put into the manor, Zhang Hai's heart thumped a few times for no reason. Then, Zhang Hai found that the spiritual energy in his body, which was originally not slow, actually increased again. It actually hasn't reached the upper limit. It seems that after reaching level 2, I took it for granted. Feeling that the absorption speed in his body had increased by almost 30%, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be a little speechless. At the same time, his heart was burning with passion. With these new species and his Hatian jade bed, perhaps it wouldn't take long for him to reach level 3. Chapter 463. The thickness of the skin has increased, and the ability to resist ultraviolet rays has also increased. Looking at Zhang Hai and Xiaoya in front of her, although Bernice's voice was still calm, it was not difficult to see from her violently shaking pupils that she was really surprised. Yeah, does that mean that I can go out and bask in the sun? Hearing her words, Xiaoya instantly jumped up and hugged Zhang Hai's neck, then asked Bernice with a nervous face. She completely ignored Zhang Hai's head, but to be honest, Zhang Hai didn't want to eat this kind of tofu either. You shouldn't be able to bask in the sun directly, but you can open the curtains in the morning and at sunset. Looking at her sister, Bernice thought for a moment and said seriously, "That's very good, thank you so much, Zhang Hai." Hearing that although she couldn't bask in the sun directly now, she could open the curtains, Xiaoya's face flashed with a trace of excitement. As long as she could see the sun, it was already a very unimaginable thing for her. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but turn her head and sincerely thank Zhang Hai. Then she kissed Zhang Hai's face. Fortunately, she kissed his face. Otherwise Zhang Hai would be even more embarrassed. "It's okay. Didn't we agree that I will treat your illness?" Feeling the warm and soft lips on his face, Zhang Hai also smiled. To be honest, Xiaoya becoming better was the thing he hoped to see the most. Since Zhang Hai came back, he had been treating Xiaoya's illness. Every day, he would transfer about 1/20th of a piece of aura to her. Then he would take the initiative to communicate with this aura and carry out the treatment in her body. But unfortunately before today, he didn't think that this aura would be of any use. Xiaoya's body was getting healthier and stronger, just like Aphrodite and the others. Their bodies were developing better and better, and the original fat was also gradually turning into muscles. Of course, it was the kind of streamlined A4 waist, long legs, and waistline. These days, Xiaoya's body also gradually became visible. This was because she didn't do anything. If she also exercised, it might appear faster. But even so, after receiving a month of treatment, her physical fitness was quite good. But the problem was that her physical fitness was better, but her white elf-like appearance and hair didn't change at all. Originally, Zhang Hai and the others thought that the treatment didn't have any effect, until yesterday. A mosquito entered Xiaoya's room. When she was killing the mosquito, she accidentally opened the thick curtains and was exposed to the sunlight. This scene happened to be seen by Bernice and she immediately pulled her back. But then she found that although Xiaoya's body was exposed to the sunlight, her body didn't seem to be affected. She did another checkup today and found that although her skin was still white, it unknowingly became more resistant to ultraviolet rays, although she still couldn't directly expose herself to them. But some gentle sunlight could no longer have any effect on her body. "You are really, really amazing." Looking at her excited sister, Bernice also pushed the tools in front of her to the side, then looked at Zhang Hai with a curious face. She didn't know how Zhang Hai treated her sister, nor did she know what medicine Zhang Hai used. But now that her sister can have such a transformation, to be honest, she was full of curiosity and excitement. Looking at Zhang Hai's smiling face, Bernice also smiled. Although she is very curious, she won't ask. This is also what she and Zhang Hai have agreed before. As long as Zhang Hai can cure her sister, nothing else matters. Thank you for the compliment. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also smiled. Originally, he thought that his treatment didn't have any effect, but now it seems that it only has no effect on the appearance, but it's understandable. His spiritual energy really has no effect on the appearance. Whether it's Feng Yunqin, Ai Xiaoxi, Afra, Delina, or Marian, the physical fitness of the women who receive Zhang Hai's spiritual energy will improve. This is inevitable. A one-time large infusion of spiritual energy can even repair all the sores on a woman's body. For example, Afra and the other girls' most important thing, but it doesn't change their appearance. Their original appearance will remain the same. Even if there are some white hairs, it won't change. In other words, Zhang Hai's spiritual energy can repair the human body, but it can't repair the recessive genes and the factors in the DNA. This is also the reason why Zhang Hai doubted whether his spiritual energy can cure Xiaoya, but now that it has an effect, he is more happy than anything. Looking at Xiaoya's appearance, Zhang Hai also touched her silver-white hair. Feeling the temperature of Zhang Hai's big hand, Xiaoya's face couldn't help but blush. To be honest, this is the first time she was so close to a man. Even between her and her father they were not so close. Indeed, children with this disease do look a little afraid to be close to others. At home, her parents are actually a little afraid of her. The only one who isn't afraid of her is her second elder sister, who is also her favorite relative. But now there are many people here who aren't afraid of her, including Zhang Hai, Delina, Marian, Azalina, Afra, Dana, Hilda, Becky, Sheila, Ohilia, Bridget, Janice, Uncle Robbins, Uncle Edward, Uncle Birkdahl, Uncle Philemon, and so on. But except for Zhang Hai, the others are all foreigners, so she is not very close to them. Unlike Zhang Hai, she really relies on Zhang Hai now. Not only because Zhang Hai cured her, but also because Zhang Hai is her first heterosexual friend. Is there a pure friendship between a man and a woman? Whether it's Zhang Hai or Xiaoya, it might not be realistic. Therefore, feeling Zhang Hai's big hand, Xiaoya's face blushed. Well, from now on, you're allowed to open the curtains before 10 o'clock in the morning and after 4 o'clock in the evening. However, you still have to close the curtains for the 6 hours between 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock. Looking at the intimate appearance of the two people in front of her, Bernice's heart suddenly skipped a beat. She didn't know why, but looking at Zhang Hai and Xiaoya's appearance, she felt uncomfortable. Is it because of Zhang Hai or Xiaoya? She didn't know, but she still said subconsciously. Hearing her sister's words, Xiaoya and Zhang Hai also recovered from the atmosphere just now. Then Xiaoya nodded with a smile. By the way, sister, can I go to the hot spring now? Xiaoya suddenly asked while looking at Bernice. Yes, but only at night. Because there are a lot of substances in the hot spring, Xiaoya's skin's ability to withstand ultraviolet light was too poor, so Bernice always forbade her to go to the hot spring. However, after the test, they found that her skin already had a certain level of protection. If they still didn't allow her to go, she would probably rebel. Hearing her sister's words, Xiaoya also cheered happily. Finally, there was another outdoor activity. After ordering to go to the hot spring in the evening, Xiaoya was in a state of excitement. In the afternoon, she specially told Delina and Marian that they must wait for her when they go to the hot spring in the evening, because she can also go to the hot spring with them. Her excitement made her perform better than usual when she cooked in the evening, and the food she cooked was especially delicious. After eating dinner and cleaning up, Zhang Hai and the others also went to the hot spring in a mighty manner. Since Zhang Hai's hot spring was built, it has become a place where Zhang Hai and the others go to every day. The Americans didn't really care much about the hot springs. Moreover, Zhang Hai also gave each villa a water line to pass through. Therefore, Robbins and the others were very sensible. If they wanted to take a bath at night, they wouldn't come to this bathroom. Instead, they would take a bath at home, including their wives. Zhang Hai's bathroom was actually the place where Zhang Hai, Aphrodite, Delina, Marian, Azalina, and Bernice would take a bath. Every night, when they were tired, they would come here to soak and take a bath. Of course, Zhang Hai would also go with them. They would sit in the same pool and listen to the voices next to them. But today, with Littleya joining them, it felt a little different. Maybe because of Bernice's habit, when Delina and the others go to the hot spring, they will wear swimsuits, but after 2 days, they will not wear swimsuits, but directly go in naked. If they are too embarrassed, they will wrap themselves in a bath towel. But Jiang Hai recently heard their conversation. It seems that they don't even wrap themselves in a bath towel, and tonight is also the same. When Jiang Hai slowly sat down in the pool, the sound of girls chattering could be heard from the other side. Wow, Delina, I didn't expect your upper body to be so big. Usually wearing loose clothes, I didn't notice it. Xueqi, you are also not bad. Your skin is so tender that water can be squeezed out. Hey, Aphrodite, you still have the nerve to talk about me. Yours is the biggest among them. How can yours be so big? Let me tell you, Xueqi, if you want it to be big, you have to rely on others. Aphrodite's is so big, mainly because she is already with Jiang Hai. So if you want it to be big, you have to rely on a man. You know. Really? But if you want to find Jiang Hai, won't you be a bit shy? Xueqi, don't listen to them. These guys only know how to make fun of you. Listening to the sounds coming from next door, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel his face and ears turn red. To be honest, regarding this matter, Jiang Hai is quite willing to help. No, he is a man of principle. Chapter 464. Listening to the voices over there, to be honest, if it was just for Feng Yuexiong, then Jiang Hai would be very happy to help. However, as soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Jiang Hai unconsciously thought of the situation over there. In the misty water, a group of young and beautiful girls with red and white bodies were in the hot spring, ready to be picked. At the thought of this, Jiang Hai's hand unconsciously touched the thing that was already as hard as steel. However, after touching it a few times, he forced himself to stop because he remembered that the water in this pool was interconnected. If he had fun here and solved the problem, wouldn't it be troublesome if the water flowed over and made a few girls pregnant? He had recently seen some news about some men doing it in the swimming pool and then causing other women to get pregnant. He didn't want to be a father without even enjoying it. Therefore, in order to drive away the tempting image in his mind, Jiang Hai had to shift his thoughts to other places. As he thought about it, he thought about the construction of his manor. Jiang Hai had been back for more than a month, and now it was officially the end of July. It was the hottest time of the year in the northern hemisphere, but now in his manor, everything was peaceful. After he came back, he spent 20 days building the hot spring and the river. The river played a great role now. The cold underground water that emerged every day diluted a lot of the hot air. Not only people, but also cattle benefited a lot. At this time of the year, according to Luo Binci and the others, it was difficult for people and cattle to endure. After all, if people were hot, they could find a place to escape the heat, but cattle couldn't. Cattle had to eat all the time. With such a big body, eating only grass in the sky was quite amazing. Therefore, cattle needed to eat outside all the time, so it was easy to get sunburned. In addition, the weather was hot, and there were many mosquitoes. Cattle were also prone to diseases, but since the river was built, the cattle's life had been much better. Every day, when it was the hottest time, these cows were willing to walk in the river. The river was very shallow, and Jiang Hai's cows were very strong. Although Angus cattle was a small breed, the water level of 1.5 meters was not enough to drown them. Swimming in the river not only dispelled the heat, but also drowned the mosquitoes on his body, making the smell of the cow lighter. On the other hand, the mosquitoes on the cow and the cow excrement were delicacies such as small fish, shrimps, and crabs in the river. Luo Binci and the others didn't agree with Jiang Hai's decision to build the river. They felt that Jiang Hai was redundant. But now, they felt that Jiang Hai was really far-sighted. He actually thought of such a clever move. Regarding this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. This was because he didn't think about this at all. But if there were benefits, it was always a happy thing. A month after he returned, the imperial court ship and Wang Yang's jade finally arrived. These days, the Hatian jade bed, floor, and reclining chair that Jiang Hai liked the most were finally ready. He slept on the Hatian jade every day, and sure enough, the absorption speed increased again. Now, Jiang Hai could absorb 24 pieces of spiritual energy every day. Of course, there was another reason. There were more types of creatures in the manor. When the creatures from the country entered the manor, Jiang Hai felt that the spiritual energy in his body increased again. This made Jiang Hai feel that the amount of spiritual energy in his body hadn't reached the upper limit yet. Then, he deliberately went to buy a batch of cows and a batch of salmon seedlings. But when these creatures entered the manor, Jiang Hai's spiritual energy didn't increase. This made Jiang Hai seem to understand something. The amount of spiritual energy in his body was one aspect. Another aspect was the types of animals and plants. This time, the things he got were basically Hua Xia's specialties. Even if they weren't Hua Xia's specialties, they weren't found in North America or the Atlantic Ocean. Moreover, the quantity wasn't small, which was why there was such an effect. This made Jiang Hai couldn't help but think. This spiritual energy seemed to be related to the collection of creatures from all over the world. But to be honest, if Jiang Hai still wanted to collect creatures like this, it might be a little troublesome. It was fine when he wasn't noticed. After all, he only collected some domestic creatures. The number wasn't a lot. He could still eat them himself. Of course, this referred to the creatures on the land. But if too many creatures were introduced, it would cause an ecological imbalance in North America. In the biological chain, the biggest problem was foreign species. Every creature had a natural enemy in the place where it lived. Just like the rabbits in Australia. In other continents, rabbits had natural enemies. But when they first arrived in Australia, these rabbits didn't have natural enemies. So, it became a rabbit disaster. They ate a lot of Australia's grasslands, leaving the main cattle and sheep without food. Recently, in order to eliminate these rabbits, Australia exhausted all means to reduce the number of rabbits from the initial 600 million to 100 million. It had to be said that the Australians were also very hardworking. So, if Jiang Hai wanted to introduce a large number of creatures, the American government would definitely jump out to stop him. What a joke. They didn't want North America to become the second Australia. After the topic was over, Jiang Hai returned to his manor. Although he couldn't introduce creatures on a large scale. But if it was only a small introduction, and the number of creatures introduced was not a lot, it might not be impossible. Just like the chickens, sheep, donkeys, and pigs he brought this time, the American customs didn't make things too difficult for Jiang Hai. They just tested them and found that they didn't have any diseases. After all, the United States wasn't small. There were 300 million people. Jiang Hai's creatures weren't a big deal for the Americans. Now, Jiang Hai was waiting for his matters to be solved before leaving again. Don't forget that Du Feimin still owed Jiang Hai an opportunity to buy oil futures. Jiang Hai's ability to make money wasn't very strong. In addition to selling cattle, he couldn't sell fish for money now, so he could only sell some treasures on sunken ships. Of course, if possible, he would also introduce some creatures that belonged to South America for his fish farm. Jiang Hai believed that his aura would increase faster in this way. Thinking of his aura, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stand up from the water. After taking a picture of himself with his mobile phone, Jiang Hai sat down and began to count the scales. This time, Jiang Hai had a total of 1,620 scales. After a few months of growth, the scales seemed to be almost full. But recently, many of the newly grown scales were put by Jiang Hai into the fish and animals. Especially the Chinese bahaba fish, Yangtze River grenadier fish, and large yellow croaker that Jiang Hai had high hopes for. In addition to the first day when he put them into the water, he would inject some aura into them almost every day these days, even though the number of these fish was astonishing. Jiang Hai couldn't release them one by one, but these days, Jiang Hai also consumed a lot of his aura. However, the aura also had an effect. At present, although the 8 Chinese bahaba fish had only been in the water for a short time, they had already grown a little. As for the fry of the Yangtze River grenadier fish and large yellow croaker, they were changing every day. After ensuring their lives, Jiang Hai collected the money with peace of mind. But even if he used the aura like this, the scales were still steadily improving. Now taking a look at the scales, there was only a palm-sized piece left that was not covered by the scales. Jiang Hai could now grow 24 scales a day. Maybe in less than a week, Jiang Hai would upgrade again. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai suddenly felt a sense of excitement in his heart. Ever since he had this Dragon Ball and the tattoo on his body, Jiang Hai was quite interested in his own upgrade. At level 1, the python needed 3 scales to turn into a drop of spirit blood. It also needed Jiang Hai's blood to improve the genes of the creatures and let them grow to their best state. After about half a year, Jiang Hai turned from a python to a flood dragon. After turning into a flood dragon, The amount of scales increased to 3. And the most important thing was that Zhang Hai didn't have to bleed himself anymore. He could mobilize the aura in his body and inject it into the bodies of the creatures he came into contact with. Now, he was about to evolve from a flood dragon to another level. If Zhang Hai guessed correctly, after the flood dragon, he should be a dragon. After becoming a dragon, what new abilities would Zhang Hai have? The increase of physical fitness was inevitable. In addition to this, would he have any other abilities? Like a dragon riding the clouds? Or something like making rain? Thinking about it, he really had some expectations. If he could really fly, then he had to be careful. If he was accidentally photographed, he might be captured and studied as an alien. But if he could fly, it would be very interesting. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile. Thinking about it, the fire in his heart gradually subsided. By the time he reacted, there was no sound next door. It seemed that the girls had gone back. Zhang Hai didn't say much. He stood up directly, wiped his body, and walked back to the villa. Then he returned to his room, lay on the bed, touched the place where the scales were constantly growing, and gradually fell asleep. The next day, the weather wasn't very good. Zhang Hai's manor was next to the seaside, and those who lived by the seaside knew that the sea was actually quite reliable during spring, autumn, and winter. But during summer, the wind was very strong. The weather at the seaside was just like a woman's face. During July and August, the weather would change very quickly. Yesterday, the sun was still high in the sky, but in the early hours of the morning, the wind began to blow. When Zhang Hai got up in the morning, it was already raining outside, and the rain was not small. Zhang Hai, who couldn't go out to exercise, could only exercise at home. Fortunately, there was a gym in his house. As for Bernice, she also practiced in the room. Before Zhang Hai finished his exercise, Daliana ran over and told Zhang Hai, "Sandy is here." Chapter 465. Hi Zhang Hai. Seeing Zhang Hai walking downstairs, Xueqi, who was sitting on the sofa, stood up. But when she saw Zhang Hai's naked upper body, she couldn't help but be speechless, and her face turned red. Hearing Daliana's words, Zhang Hai didn't say much. He stopped his exercise and walked out with a towel. When he ran outside, the sweat on his body would dry faster when the wind blew. But now he can't run at home, so in order to avoid getting wet, he ran with his upper body naked. Bernice was already used to this, so she didn't care. But now, Zhang Hai walked downstairs with a towel around his neck, which made Xueqi a bit embarrassed. After all, this was the first time she saw Zhang Hai's upper body, and it was really strong, which made her a bit shy. "Hi Sandy, why are you here in such a rainy day? Is there anything urgent?" Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also smiled, walked to her and sat down. Regarding Xueqi, Zhang Hai didn't know how he felt in his heart now. You can say that he likes her, but he really didn't have much desire. He just directly carried her to his bed, and then did something. You can say that he doesn't like her, but Zhang Hai likes the feeling of being with her very much. Between the two, they are like a couple, but they are not a couple. Zhang Hai was really confused, and so was Xueqi. During the period when Zhang Hai came back, they met twice. The first time was when Zhang Hai went to the town hall to find her. The second time was less than a week ago, when the construction of Winthrop Town was finally completed. The road into the town was widened, and a large parking lot was added. Zhang Hai's row of seaside villas was also built. Zhang Hai specially went to take a look. The environment was quite good. The front yard of the villa was a neat lawn. Outside was a row of old trees, which were all dug from the periphery of the Alabama mountain range. The backyard was a private beach, and the decoration of the rooms was slightly different. There was an American country style, a high-end hotel style, a European style, a Gothic style, a Huaxia style, and an Indian style. The exterior was different, and the interior was also different. Of course, the style of the hotel was the most common. In the villa, there were all kinds of furniture and electrical appliances. There was even a separate oven and the like for the other party to use as a stove. It could be said that it was very thoughtful. The bedsheets and cleaning of the rooms were taken care of every day. They were all middle-aged women in Winthrop Town who had nothing to do. The main person in charge was Philemon's wife, Mrs. Turner. Of course, in addition to Mrs. Turner, Charles's wife, Cece's wife, and Christian's wife all worked in town and received another salary. Anyway, it was close to home, so it was a good choice to find something for them to do. The same was true for the commercial street. 11 of Zhang Hai's 12 gatehouses had been rented out. Some were restaurants, some were for selling things, and one of them was left empty. After discussing with Mayor Wallace, they merged the store next to it and made it into a small, free museum. The main display was some small objects, photos, and the like. They introduced the history of the United States and Indian culture. They also specially invited an Iroquois to give an explanation here through Mayor Wallace. After so many days of construction, almost everything in the town was done. Therefore, SH-20 Clive was free recently. A few days ago, they specially invited Zhang Hai, Delina, and Marion to have a meal in town. Although the food was not as good as the food in Zhang Hai's house, everyone had a good time. At the same time, the relationship between SH-20 Clive and Zhang Hai was gradually getting closer. Zhang Hai had the idea of building a successful business with SH-20 Clive. As for Winthrop, Zhang Hai also planned to collect money here honestly. However, the problem was that some people did not want them to earn money. The town tourism plan may be a bit troublesome. SH-20 Clive looked at Zhang Hai and sighed. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Now that the town was built, and he spent 250 million yuan, she's telling him that the plan will be troublesome? What kind of joke is this? Isn't our town almost finished now? So Mayor Wallace has been running to Boston every day these days, hoping to get some tourists through the Boston government and draw up a tourist route. But the situation isn't very optimistic. Seeing Zhang Hai frowning, SH-20 Clive sighed and said helplessly. In fact, in her opinion, the construction of the town was quite good. It was still very attractive. If you wanted culture, you could have fun. If you wanted fun, you could have fun. The atmosphere was there. But the problem was that if no one came, it would be useless no matter how well the town was built. What do you mean it's not very optimistic? No one came, or they don't want people to come. As soon as he heard SH-20 Clive's words, Zhang Hai said decisively, the people in Boston really don't have a route, or they don't want Winthrop to have a route. This was hard to say. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, SH-20 Clive was also a little speechless. In fact, she also understood Zhang Hai's thoughts. Her thoughts were similar to Zhang Hai's. She didn't think that the people in Boston had any good intentions. In fact, it was understandable. No matter which country, if you want to engage in tourism and development, you need to report to the higher-ups first. In other words, if Zhang Hai wanted to engage in tourism and invested 250 million yuan, if he directly gave the money to Boston and let them build it, then there would be no current situation. But the problem was that Boston might not use 250 million yuan to build Winthrop. They might build Cambridge or Chelsea, which had nothing to do with Zhang Hai and Winthrop. At most, Zhang Hai would use the money to invest and make money, that was all. Even if Winthrop was built, the 250 million yuan could not be used for construction. The construction team must be related to the government, and the quality would be monitored by the government. It was also possible that half of the construction was built, and the money would be transferred to other places when other places needed money, etc. If someone directly embezzled this money, no one would dare to do so. After all, this was a fund of hundreds of millions of dollars. But if it was just misappropriated or used to build other places, then no one would care. And a lot of the money would be eaten by the Boston government. But now, Zhang Hai directly bypassed them and built the town. This made many people quite unhappy. These people were unhappy, so they naturally wanted to hinder Winthrop and Zhang Hai. The simplest way was to have no tourists, which was also the most fatal method. If they didn't advertise or arrange a tourist route for you, then no one would know about your town. In the United States, there were thousands of small towns like Winthrop. Who would care about you? Without tourists, you wouldn't be famous, and without fame, no one would come. This was a vicious cycle. It directly cut off Zhang Hai's source of income. 250 million yuan? It was all for nothing. It was precisely because of this that Mayor Wallace had been begging everyone in Boston these days, hoping that these people would be merciful. He even wanted to offer a part of the town hall's income to satisfy these people. Looking at Mayor Wallace's worried face, SH-20 Clive hesitated for 2 days, and today, she came to Zhang Hai. She felt that Zhang Hai might have a way. After all, he was a rich man, and rich people always had a lot of connections. Hearing Sh20 Clive's words, Zhang Hai smiled. Sometimes, you can't blame others. Okay, I got it. Where is Mayor Wallace now? I'll talk to him. I'll help him solve the problem of tourists. Looking at Sh20 Clive in front of him, Zhang Hai said with a serious face. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Sh20 Clive was stunned. Zhang, do you know anyone in Boston? After being stunned for a moment, Sh20 Clive couldn't help but ask excitedly. No, I have the routes and tourists in my hands. Shaking his head, Zhang Hai smiled mysteriously. When Zhang Hai was in China, when he was helping the government to manage Du Feimin's oil sales, he told Minister Qin 6 routes. 3 of them were related to the Qi family, but Zhang Hai didn't care. The last 3 routes were related to him. The most important one was that Zhang Hai said that China would organize tourists to come to Winthrop. Originally, he only wanted to expand his source of income. Now, the whole world knew that the richest people were Huaxia tourists. Wherever these people went, they would spend a lot of money to support the development and construction of the local tourism industry. Now, most of the major tourist cities in the world relied on Huaxia tourists to support them. But Mayor Wallace and the others didn't know this. They thought that tourists were mainly from America or Europe. But how could those poor Americans and Europeans compare to the powerful Huaxia Antis group? So in the beginning, Zhang Hai didn't say anything. He just treated it as a way to expand the number of tourists. But he didn't expect that the normal route, in the eyes of Mayor Wallace, would be directly strangled by the people in Boston. Without publicity, it was certain that very few tourists from Europe and the United States would come here to play. Of course, Zhang Hai and the others could go to the TV station to buy some advertising time for publicity, but this was not a small expense. So for Mayor Wallace, this was a dead knot and very troublesome, but for Zhang Hai, it was very simple. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.